Some realities feel real until you question them. This isn't just a list. It's a slow unraveling of everything you thought was solid. From level 1 to level 100, each paradox peels back a layer of your world, exposing the fragile code beneath your senses. The deeper you fall, the more real it feels, like a memory you didn't live or a glitch you've always ignored. Let yourself drift, if the simulation allows it. Let's start with level 1. Imagine yourself alone in a quiet room at night. The lamplight is soft and the air is still. You notice, perhaps, the gentle creak of the floor beneath your feet or the faint ticking of a clock somewhere behind you. Now, pause and consider. Can you be certain of what exists in the space behind your head? It is a simple question, yet oddly unsettling. The walls, the window, perhaps a forgotten book or a shadow on the far shelf, all of it just out of view. Some thinkers have wondered, what if those spaces do not truly exist until you turn toward them, until your senses give them permission to appear? This is the quiet paradox known as the unrendered space syndrome. Daily life, of course, is built on faith in continuity. People walk down lanes and never question if the path behind them is still there, as if the world itself is steady and perpetual, always waiting to be revisited. But imagine a life lived with a gentle suspicion that the ground behind your steps might dissolve into nothingness, waiting for your gaze to summon it back. This isn't just a modern digital fantasy. Even in ancient times, scholars sometimes puzzled over whether unseen things had real substance or only borrowed it when someone paid attention. There are old records, quiet notations in the margins of philosophy, where early thinkers debated if reality needed witnesses. In distant monasteries, monks copied such thoughts by candlelight, describing a world that springs gently into being only when you are near, only when your senses are ready to receive it. Theirs was a life of silent corridors, of gardens glimpsed through narrow windows, of faith that the sun would rise tomorrow, though no one was watching. Today, neuroscientists quietly trace the same old mystery, mapping how the mind assembles what is seen and gently fills in what is not. The rhythm of your life, the soft choreography of glances and movements, may be building reality as you go. The chair across the room, the hallway you left behind, the moonlit street outside, all waiting, perhaps, for a reason to become real. And so, as you drift toward sleep, you might notice that even the darkness behind your eyes feels a little softer, a little more forgiving, as if the world itself is quietly willing to rest, unrendered, until you next decide to look. Imagine yourself standing at the threshold of a quiet, sunlit room, its air undisturbed, walls humming with the stillness of early morning. The gentle hush is broken only by the soft flutter of curtains and the distant murmur of life beyond the glass. In this space, your movements are your own. You breathe, you stretch, you linger in the comfort of being unseen. But now, let your mind wander to a subtle shift. A presence enters. A watcher, not hostile, not even known, but simply there. Their gaze, steady and quiet, lands on you. In that moment, something delicate stirs beneath the surface. Throughout history and across cultures, people have noticed how being observed can change the fabric of experience. Ancient philosophers once mused that the soul straightened itself beneath another's eyes, like a plant turning toward sunlight. In medieval villages, where privacy was rare and every window was a mirror of communal expectation, daily life shaped itself to the rhythm of watchers, neighbors, elders, silent passers-by. You may notice, even in memory, how laughter softens, gestures tidy themselves, and even thoughts seem to drift toward what is expected. Now, let yourself drift further, beyond anecdote, into gentle speculation. Psychologists today might call this social mirroring or the observer effect. Yet the feeling runs deeper, almost mystical. When watched, you become the version of yourself that the observer believes in, without conscious choice. The corners of your behavior smooth to fit unseen outlines, reality shifting as softly as light across a floor. Each watcher brings their own silent script, and in some small way, you perform it unaware. This is the quiet paradox at the heart of the Observer-Presence Overwrite. The room remains the same, but you are quietly rewritten, smile curved, posture changed, thoughts subtly guided, becoming not who you intended, but who is expected. And as the watcher turns away, the gentle hush returns, leaving you to wonder which version of yourself was real and which was only ever borrowed from another's gaze. Imagine yourself sitting quietly in a sunlit room, the world moving at its usual measured pace. Then, something sudden, a jolt, maybe a slip on a wet stone, or a bird unexpectedly crashing into the window. For a moment, time seems to bend. The air thickens. Your mind, usually so practiced at predicting the next second, now stutters. Everything feels oddly slow, as if the world has dropped a few frames and is struggling to catch up. Scientists call this a distortion of time perception, but it's tempting to wonder, are you simply noticing reality's simulation engine lagging, desperately trying to render every detail as your senses demand more information than usual? In quiet moments, life's frame rate seems perfectly steady. Each footstep in a garden, the gentle flicker of candlelight, the weight of a blanket, everything unfolds at the same smooth pace. But in moments of thrill or during a brush with danger, your experience fractures into hundreds of vivid fragments. The ticking of a clock stretches. A face in a crowd becomes impossibly clear. In these moments, it's as though the simulation that generates your reality must slow down to keep up, re-rendering each instant with more precision. Across cultures, people have noticed this phenomenon for centuries. In diaries from the past, survivors of accidents and soldiers in battle wrote that a single second could feel like a minute. Mystics once believed these moments revealed another layer of reality, a veil briefly lifted. Modern research, meanwhile, shows that it's not memory, but perception itself that stretches and compresses to fit the mind's needs. But whether you call it a biological glitch or the simulation showing its seams, the experience remains strangely universal. Tonight, as you listen, you might begin to notice your own rhythm slowing, the steady pace of your breath, the gentle comfort of repetition, the sense that reality is rendering just enough to keep you calm. If you drift, you might wonder, does the world outside your eyelids continue at full speed, or does it gently pause, waiting for you to rejoin its quiet procession? Imagine yourself sifting through memories late at night, the soft hush of your room wrapping you in gentle quiet. You remember with the subtle certainty that only the mind can conjure, the way you once apologized to a friend for a harsh word. In this recollection, your voice is low and steady, your friend's face relaxes, and the world feels repaired, an emotional splinter eased away. Yet somewhere deeper, a quiet doubt lingers. Did it truly happen, or did your mind simply insert a peaceful ending where none existed? In the landscape of memory, the mind sometimes acts like a cautious caretaker, patching old wounds with new fabrications so the present can run smoothly. These patches don't announce themselves. They blend seamlessly into the faded texture of your story, offering comfort even as the past grows quietly rearranged. Sometimes, these false patches resolve old regrets, softening edges that were once sharp and hard to touch. You might find yourself less haunted by an old mistake, simply because your mind, without asking, slipped in a scene where you set things right. Throughout daily life, these gentle edits help you move forward. The mind, always working in the background, keeps watch for emotional bugs, moments that might snag your well-being. Like an unseen craftsman, it weaves new threads where the fabric of experience thinned. A memory of forgiveness, a recollection of kindness given or received, even if they never truly happened, allow the rhythm of your days to continue undisturbed. If you ever wonder why certain regrets feel lighter than before, or why some memories seem suspiciously smooth, you're not alone. The system that patches memory favors comfort over accuracy. The room stays quiet, the mind drifts, and in the gentle murmur of the past, you find rest, even if some of what you remember was only ever meant to help you sleep. Imagine yourself in a quiet room, one you know well. Some days, standing there feels oddly heavy. Your body presses into the floor as if gravity itself thickens with your mood. On other days, you might sense a lightness, as if each step is easier, the air less dense, your presence less anchored. This isn't physics at work, but the subtle simulation of gravity by your own mind. Mass, here, is assigned not by the universe, but by your emotional state. Across history, people noticed these strange shifts. In old diaries, a kitchen warmed by laughter was said to feel weightless, while a study haunted by regret seemed to pull feet toward the ground. A craftsman's workshop late at night felt dense and unmoving after a harsh word or a failure, yet the same room could feel almost buoyant on mornings filled with hope. We don't often question why this happens, but it's as if gravity, in such moments, becomes a mirror of our internal load, a gentle agreement between your memories, your presence, and the space around you. Archaeologists sometimes find worn stones in medieval homes, where people once paused, not from tiredness, but because the air seemed thick with unspoken burdens. So the next time you enter a room and feel inexplicably light or heavy, consider that it's not the world's gravity that has changed, but the invisible weight you bring with you, quietly simulating the field you must move through, one step at a time. Imagine yourself listening to an old story, the kind passed down across generations. Perhaps the words are familiar: "Time heals all wounds," or "Every cloud has a silver lining." At first, these phrases ring hollow, almost faded from overuse. But consider for a moment how once they carried fresh weight, born of lives lived and lessons hard-earned. Over time, the edges wore smooth, the colors faded, until what was once revelation now sounds like gentle background noise. This is the quiet puzzle known as the meaning compression bug. In daily life, you might hear an elder offer advice that feels strangely obvious, even as you sense it carries something deeper just out of reach. Wisdom, repeated, becomes gentle and unthreatening. Words you can let drift by or carry quietly, like a smooth stone in your pocket. The world, it seems, makes this process inevitable. Just as a painter must blend details in the far background to keep a picture from becoming too busy, so does experience flatten the richness of deep truths into phrases simple enough to fit in the crowded corridors of memory. There are old books, worn, softly scented with dust, where philosophers wrote with careful precision, trying to preserve the sharpness of their discoveries. Yet, generation by generation, ideas compress themselves into proverbs, each retelling smoothing out a little more meaning, the way a well-told story loses its sharpness but gains its comfort. Modern minds, busy with 1,000 distractions, rely on these compressed truths to navigate daily life, even as they sometimes wish for something more vivid, more alive. As you drift, notice how these echoes of wisdom settle in the mind, gentle, familiar, quietly resilient. The meaning is not lost, only hidden within simplicity, waiting to expand again when you need it most. And so, the words may seem small, but their quiet comfort is always there, patient, persistent, and softly enduring as you rest. Imagine yourself as an actor upon a familiar stage, the floor creaking softly beneath careful steps, scenery unmoving, the air holding the faint warmth of lamplight and dust. You carry a script, the story of who you are, worn smooth with repetition. Lines spoken to friends, gestures offered in meetings. Even your private hopes seem well practiced, part of the daily rhythm. It's easy to believe that beneath these choices, a true and unchanging self quietly persists, always present, always waiting. But consider this. Perhaps your so-called personality is more like a carefully arranged set of props, upgraded and rearranged as you move through life's scenes. Small adjustments, a sharper joke, a measured response, a fresh hobby, serve as cosmetic changes, paint on old wood. The deeper structure remains untouched, neither tested nor rebuilt. The script only ever calls for minor improvisation, never a rewrite. This sense of continuity comforts us, even as the world around us changes. Imagine the gentle repetition of morning routines, the predictability of favorite foods, the soft hum of everyday patterns. Yet, true transformation rarely arrives without disruption. It is often a crash, sudden loss, failure, or unexpected change that forces us to examine the supports beneath the scenery. Only then, in the quiet aftermath, do we find the need to rebuild the structure, crafting something stronger, more honest. So the question lingers, is your selfhood built or only repaired when life finally demands it? Until that moment, perhaps the real depth remains waiting, just out of sight, behind the painted backdrop, quiet and unformed. Imagine yourself standing in a quiet room, pale morning light filtering through a curtained window. You approach a mirror, simple, a little worn at the edges. As your eyes meet your reflection, a hush settles, almost as if the room is waiting. In this gentle pause, you might notice a thought arrive, subtle and uninvited. Perhaps it's the memory of an old conversation, a strange sense of longing, or a fragment of an idea that feels oddly out of place. It settles quietly in the mind, blending into the background of your day. Throughout history, people have treated mirrors with a blend of curiosity and caution. In many old houses, mirrors were covered during storms or illness, as if to protect those inside from something unseen. Some believed mirrors could capture wandering spirits, while others whispered that looking too long might reveal not just your face, but another's presence behind your eyes. Even today, the experience of staring into a mirror can feel strangely unfamiliar, like glimpsing both yourself and a stranger all at once. Scientists suggest that our minds fill in gaps when we see our reflection, projecting stray thoughts and feelings that may not truly belong to us. Still, it is comforting to imagine that the mirror is a gentle portal, one that sometimes brings an unexpected thought, quietly weaving it into the rhythm of your inner world. You might find, as the day drifts on, that the thought lingers, soft as the dust in a sunbeam, impossible to say where it came from, but now part of your private loop. And so, as you rest tonight, you may wonder, the next time you gaze into a mirror, what new thought will quietly join the familiar pattern of your mind, settling in like a gentle echo? Imagine yourself revisiting an early morning from childhood, light slipping through thin curtains, the familiar rhythm of footsteps in the kitchen. The sounds and gestures repeat, your caretaker's voice calling you to breakfast, the same gentle reminders to wash your face, the careful folding of lunch into brown paper. These moments, once so alive, sometimes replay in memory with the odd, gentle predictability of a well-worn tutorial. As you look back, you may notice a certain loop. Advice always phrased the same way, concerns expressed with clockwork precision. Yet, unlike in stories where hardship rewires a parent, here the pattern seems less about pain and more about programming. It is as if your caretakers, for a time, followed invisible scripts. Predictable, safe, endlessly repeating, so you could learn the basic mechanics of being in the world. Their reactions felt stable, even automatic. When you made a mistake, a soft voice guided you toward the right answer, rarely surprised, almost always patient. Sometimes, you wonder if those responses were less about them as full, complex people, and more about the role they needed to play while you learned. In daily life, you might notice how the texture of these old patterns lingers. Even now, certain phrases echo in your mind, as if waiting to be triggered by the right situation. The way your caretaker once urged you to tie your shoes or finish your homework returns, not as active presence, but as a background process. Gentle code running in the architecture of memory. Over time, these tutorial scripts gradually faded. Your caretakers, too, shifted out of those roles, becoming more unpredictable, sometimes more distant, sometimes surprisingly complex. Yet the comfort of those early patterns remains. In the calm repetition of their guidance, you learned not only what to do, but how to expect stability in an uncertain world. If you ever find yourself longing for a predictable answer or a steady routine, It may be that the non-player parent effect is still running in the background, quietly helping you navigate each new day, even as the original tutorial phase ends and the rest of the game unfolds, unscripted. Imagine yourself waking up with a quiet sense of dread, or maybe a sudden flash of joy, but with no obvious reason. The room is unchanged, the day just beginning, yet some feeling arrives fully formed, like a mood already waiting for you before any story begins. It's as if the simulation running behind your experience loaded the emotion first, letting it settle in quietly, while the actual reason lags behind, struggling to catch up. Historians and writers have noted these mysterious feelings for centuries. A medieval scribe might describe starting a letter with trembling hands long before remembering any cause for anxiety. In rural diaries, a farmer confides that a wave of grief sometimes arrived on a peaceful morning, as if the feeling itself had already been rendered, leaving the mind searching backward for a suitable explanation. Daily life is full of these inverted moments. You might find yourself laughing in the middle of an ordinary task, noticing the lightness first, and only then inventing a story to match, perhaps recalling an old joke or deciding that good news must be on its way. Other times, a sudden heaviness clings to the edges of an afternoon, and you look for worries or regrets to justify it, as though the mind needs narrative order even when the sequence is reversed. Psychologists call this affect before cognition, but in the gentle logic of sleep, it feels like a reminder that our inner world is sometimes rendered out of order. The simulation behind your experience may load emotion before it finishes drawing in the details, leaving you to search for meaning in feelings that seem to have arrived too soon. So the next time an unexplained joy or worry sweeps through, imagine the narrative reason is still buffering somewhere out of sight, an echo of a story not yet told, already written in the language of your emotions. Imagine yourself walking a familiar path at dusk, the world quiet, the air tinged with the cool scent of evening. You step without hurry, letting your mind wander. Suddenly, you sense a shape ahead before it appears. Or you reach for the phone a second before it rings, as if some subtle thread tugged you into the next moment just before it unfolded. Such is the gentle paradox sometimes called the consciousness elastic band. In daily life, these moments arrive quietly. Déjà vu in a sunlit kitchen, a word on your tongue just before it's spoken, a dream that predicts the feeling of a day. The sensation is soft, not alarming, an elastic stretching of awareness into what should still be hidden, as if the mind reached out, brushed against the future, then snapped gently back to its proper place. There are old stories about this, travelers pausing for no reason just before danger, artists glimpsing inspiration a heartbeat before their brush moves. In ancient villages, people would share such tales around the hearth, not as miracles, but as small reminders that the mind sometimes steps beyond its usual borders. Monks in silent halls wrote of intuition as a ripple, a gentle extension of consciousness that returns, leaving only the faintest echo. Science, too, wonders about these strange ripples. Researchers note the mind's knack for patterns, for subtle predictions that slip past conscious thought. Yet even now, no one quite knows how, or why, awareness sometimes seems to stretch ahead, then quietly, comfortingly, returns to the flow of ordinary time. And so, as you drift toward rest, you might notice how your own thoughts sometimes linger just ahead of the present, like a shadow waiting for the dawn. The world holds space for these elastic moments, gentle and forgiving, before everything settles back, quietly, into place. Imagine yourself lying in the quiet, faintly moonlit hush of your room, the air still and the covers resting just so. Sleep tugs gently at your mind, and soon you drift through a shifting parade of dreams, some clear as morning dew, others melting into fog and fragments. In these wandering worlds, you may walk unfamiliar streets, meet people who feel both known and strange, or find yourself solving quiet mysteries with a sense of purpose that lingers after waking. But sometimes, the return to wakefulness is so smooth it feels almost scripted. You blink, open your eyes, and everything is already in place: light, texture, the coolness of air on your skin, as if someone has quietly toggled a switch from one reality to another. There's no jolt, no boundary, just a sense that you have slid across a hidden seam and now find yourself inhabiting the next layer of experience. This is the gentle mystery of the sleep mode override. It echoes the quiet transitions of daily life, moving from one room to the next, from conversation to solitude, from the rhythm of work to the calm of rest. Throughout history, people have wondered where dreams end and waking life begins, noticing that the division isn't always so distinct. In old stories, dreams were often described as messages, or as secret worlds that pressed right up against waking life, separated only by a thin veil. So, as you settle back into your own rhythm tonight, you may find comfort in this seamlessness, the gentle handoff between dreaming and waking, the sense that every layer of consciousness is another room, softly illuminated, waiting for your return. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a quiet town at dusk, where the lanterns glow softly and the streets taper off into fields of tall grass. Perhaps you've felt it before, a gentle resistance to stepping beyond a certain street, or a subtle reluctance to leave a place or a routine that has always shaped your days. It doesn't feel like fear exactly. It's more like the world beyond those boundaries is blurred, unfinished, a background painted just enough to look complete from a distance, but fading into gentle uncertainty as you draw closer. Throughout history, people have noticed the strange pull of invisible boundaries. Some villages had crossroads that no one crossed after dark, while city dwellers kept to familiar districts, rarely straying beyond known landmarks. Even in personal lives, you might sense the outline of roles or relationships you never seem to cross, old friendships that quietly persist, jobs that linger far past their meaning, familiar rooms you return to each evening. It's as if these patterns are gently coded into the landscape of your life, the edges soft and resistant to change. Scholars and storytellers have wondered if the mind shapes these boundaries, or if the world itself holds places that were never fully mapped, roads that lead nowhere, stories that never quite reach their ending. In modern cities, even with maps in your pocket, some neighborhoods remain unknown, as if waiting for someone to finish drawing their details. You sense that beyond each familiar border, the world grows quiet, a gentle fog rolling in, inviting you to stay where the scene feels most real. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, consider the quiet comfort of these invisible boundaries. They mark the edges of your personal map, holding you softly within the rhythm of well-known streets, familiar faces, and nightly routines, inviting you to rest right where the code has always felt complete. Imagine yourself walking an old path just after rainfall, the ground beneath your feet soft and yielding, the air carrying a hint of moss and distant wood smoke. You pause, noticing how some aches, those that seem to arrive without warning, carry a weight far older than the moment itself. Sometimes, a sadness or pain can feel as if it was always there, waiting, even before you stepped into the scene. This feeling can seem uncanny, grief that enters with the certainty of ancient ritual, disappointment that echoes in the bones as though rehearsed by countless lives before yours. It is as if the fabric of the world quietly held a place for this hurt, pre-rendered and quietly waiting, so that when it arrives, it slips seamlessly into your story. In the rhythm of daily life, you might notice these moments, the sigh that escapes when plans unravel, the way loss can settle over a room with the softness of dusk. These sensations feel old, not because they linger, but because they seem prepared, woven into the background, their shape familiar even as the details change. Across history, people have sensed this pattern. Folklore and old songs speak of trials that repeat, of hardships that seem destined to recur. In the gentle repetition of these stories, there's a comfort, the knowledge that suffering, though prepared, can be survived. And as the scene shifts, you find yourself continuing, step by step, through an experience written into the world long before your own story began. Imagine yourself alone at night, a familiar show flickering quietly in the dark. A character on screen suffers, a loss, a heartbreak, and you feel a sudden ache, maybe even a tear forming, though you know it's all fiction. Strangely, these moments often move us more than real-world tragedies glimpsed in passing. Why is it easier to cry for a story's hero than for someone across the street? Throughout history, storytellers have known this effect. Medieval plays drew tears from crowds who'd never mourned so openly for neighbors. In letters, readers described weeping over novels' fates, while daily misfortunes left them quietly detached. It's as if the simulation of life rewards us for feeling compassion where it can do no harm, where empathy is safe, symbolic, and unlikely to disturb the smooth running of daily routines. Consider how easily you may comfort a character or root for their rescue. While in the real world, compassion can feel riskier, more tangled with uncertainty and consequence. A sad scene on the page or screen invites empathy without requiring action. The story ends, the feeling lingers gently, and nothing in the real world is disrupted. Archaeologists have even found ancient charms shaped like grieving figures, tokens for practicing sorrow in miniature before facing it in life. The mind, it seems, learns to flex its empathy first where there is least risk. So the next time you find yourself caring more for a character than a stranger, notice how the simulation rewards this safe compassion, a gentle rehearsal for a world that rarely offers simple, symbolic resolutions. Your tears, quietly shed for stories, are part of a long tradition of practicing feeling, in places where the cost is never too high. Imagine yourself sitting by a window in the quiet of early evening. The light is gentle, the world just outside blurred by the hush of dusk. You think back on faces and voices, tracing the outlines of people who once seemed to arrive by chance. Yet, as the years pass, a pattern emerges. Certain smiles, certain gestures, a familiar glint in the eyes. You notice how love, or something like it, always seems to circle back to the same type. This is the silent pattern known as the love algorithm loop. In daily life, the rhythm is subtle. Perhaps you meet someone new, only to realize they carry echoes of someone from long ago. A tilt of the head, the shape of a laugh, the way they move through a crowded room. It feels as if some hidden script is quietly flagging a match, nudging you toward the comfort of the familiar. Even when you resolve to seek something different, the pattern reasserts itself, gentle, persistent, almost inevitable. There are old stories about this, tales of villagers drawn to one another generation after generation, as if the same roles are quietly recast and played again. In grand halls and quiet cottages alike, people find themselves circling old patterns, unaware that some inner code may be steering them. Ancient poets wondered if the heart truly chooses, or if it only responds to signals written in the quiet architecture of the mind. Modern science, too, maps these invisible algorithms. Researchers speak of pattern recognition, of neural pathways shaped by memory and early bonds. The simulation of life, it seems, is always searching for efficiency, gently feeding back what feels most familiar, until, with time and self-reflection, you slowly learn to break the code and find new rhythms. As you settle into rest, you may notice the gentle echo of this loop, comforting, persistent, patient. Patterns can be softened, broken, or simply understood, allowing you at last to drift into new stories and gentle dreams. Imagine yourself walking a familiar path at dusk, the ground beneath your feet known by heart, yet the air holds an odd charge, a quiet possibility that things are not entirely as they seem. You pause, noticing the texture of the world, a certain pattern in the clouds, the way your hand fits a tool you don't recall learning to use, or a tune you can hum even though you're certain you never heard it taught. These moments drift in quietly, like soft echoes from a place just out of sight. Throughout life, there are flashes of recognition that defy easy explanation. A sudden ease with a language, a muscle memory for something you never practiced, or a rush of emotion for a memory that doesn't belong to you. It's as if, somewhere in the vast architecture of your mind, the boundaries have grown thin and porous. What if these are leaks, Small breaches where parallel timelines, alternate lives, seep through and color your experience. Ancient philosophers and mystics sometimes spoke of lives lived beside our own, forks in the road taken by other selves. Today, you might simply notice a skill surfacing in the quiet rhythm of daily life, or a story unfolding in your mind, told in the first person, but never lived. The concept is gently unsettling, but also oddly comforting. You are not merely the sum of choices made, but perhaps also the quiet recipient of infinite histories that overlap and blend. As night falls, let yourself rest in this possibility. A world where echoes drift between timelines, and your present self quietly carries the fingerprints of countless stories never told, just waiting to be remembered. Imagine yourself watching an hourglass in a quiet room, the sand flowing evenly, a soft hush marking each grain's descent. Now, picture the hourglass flickering, not smoothly counting down, but constantly resetting itself, sand piling, then vanishing, the same moments appearing again and again. In this world, time is less a river and more a looping frame, refreshed so quickly that the direction barely matters. You remember walking into a room, but you might just as clearly remember leaving, both memories vivid, both impossible to place in order. Daily life, too, can feel shaped by these invisible loops. You might find yourself certain you've already lived a moment, a conversation, a small gesture, the turning of a page, or you might sense the echo of something not yet happened, drifting at the edge of sleep. For some, these moments are labeled as memories, grounded by details and familiar faces. For others, they are marked as dreams, left unanchored, dissolving with the morning light. Yet both experiences come from the same buffer, a hidden hourglass within the mind that smooths the flow of time by looping it back and forth, over and over. Across cultures, people have wondered whether dreams are simply memories playing in reverse, or if remembering the past is only possible because the mind rehearses possible futures. Ancient storytellers wrote of lives lived out of sequence, of days repeated or skipped. Modern research suggests that the mind refreshes its sense of now so quickly, it blurs the line between what truly happened and what might have been. So tonight, as you close your eyes, you might notice your thoughts moving both ways along the timeline, some drifting back to a safe memory, others floating forward into a gentle dream. The hourglass buffer collapses and resets, each frame soft and quiet, inviting you to rest in the calm blur between memory and possibility. Imagine yourself tracing the shape of an ordinary day, a walk through familiar streets, sunlight shifting across rooftops, the soft rumble of traffic echoing through the background. Yet, woven into these routines are moments that, looking back, feel improbably safe. You remember a near miss, a vehicle stopping just in time, a slip on stairs that resolved into balance, or words spoken that diffused a tense moment before it could unravel. There's an odd sense that the world, in those instants, adjusted itself so your path could continue uninterrupted. This sensation is sometimes called the protagonist proximity bias. It's the quiet feeling that events, large or small, tilt ever so slightly to keep your narrative intact. Not through luck or fate, but because, for the story to move forward, your survival is a kind of unspoken requirement, a coded safeguard, ensuring the density of experience remains clustered around you. The rhythm of your life, then, feels subtly protected. When you recall days where troubles skirted your edge, or when you found yourself at the right place at just the right moment, it's almost as if the environment itself recalibrated to preserve your thread in the unfolding story. In daily life, you might notice this bias in small, gentle patterns, the way routine obstacles smooth themselves, or how you encounter exactly the conversation you need to hear. Over time, these moments blend into the fabric of memory, offering quiet assurance that, at least for now, the world is structured to keep you close to its center. The scene shifts, but the narrative flow gathers, gently guiding you onward, as if your continued presence is quietly written into the script of each new day. Imagine yourself in a quiet moment, perhaps lying in bed, the room softly dark. You let your thoughts wander, and a doubt starts to form. Is this world truly as it seems? You begin to notice small inconsistencies or the odd sense that something doesn't quite add up. As your skepticism grows, you may even feel a subtle pressure, a gentle tension building between the story you're told and the logic that guides you. Then, almost inevitably, something strange happens, a perfectly timed coincidence. Perhaps you think of a friend you haven't seen in years, and their name pops up in a message. Or you ponder a question, and the answer appears, unprompted, in a conversation or a line on the radio. For a moment, your suspicion falters. The world seems, once again, solid and meaningful, your certainty gently restored. Historians and philosophers have written about such moments for centuries. In ancient chronicles, a doubtful monk is reassured by a sign. In medieval tales, a skeptic is met with a fortuitous event that eases their unrest. It's as if the fabric of reality contains its own patch system, a quiet override that nudges you back from the edge of disbelief. In the gentle simulation of daily life, these moments rarely offer real guidance or profound revelation. Instead, they seem designed only to close the breach, to reset your certainty slider just enough to keep the narrative stable. You move forward, comforted not by answers, but by the feeling that, after all, the world still responds. So, the next time a well-timed coincidence arrives just as doubt begins to gather, imagine it as the disbelief patch override at work, a subtle recalibration meant not to explain, but to restore the easy flow of the story and let you drift a little longer in the comfort of belief. Imagine yourself awake at 3 a.m., the room dim and quiet, shadows stretched across the ceiling. There is a stillness to these hours, a hush as if the world itself has paused. You listen to the distant hum of a refrigerator, the whisper of wind outside, the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing. It is in these moments, when most of the world lies sleeping, that everything around you feels strangely real, every texture and detail touched by a clarity that never seems to visit in daylight. This is the subtle mystery known as the time of day loop. In daily life, these hours often pass unnoticed. But for those awake, whether by chance or intention, the air itself feels sharper, the ticking clock louder, the pattern of moonlight on the floor suddenly fascinating. There is a sense that you have slipped into a thread of the world reserved for the few. It feels as though the boundaries between thoughts and the outside world soften, as if your mind has been quietly granted access to a hidden layer. Old traditions speak of the watchman's hour, a time when poets, thinkers, and wanderers found their clearest inspiration. Monks would rise in darkness to pray, finding that their quiet devotions felt more profound while others dreamed. Even now, in the digital world, scientists and night workers sometimes notice a special focus, as if the simulation of life, when less crowded, can afford to render more detail, offering you a private audience with clarity itself. As you drift, notice how these quiet hours are not empty, but filled with a gentle abundance, each breath, each sound, each thought unfolding with unexpected depth. The night shares its secrets, softly, patiently, before the world stirs and the loop begins again. And as dawn approaches, you might find yourself carrying a piece of that midnight clarity into your waking day, a quiet thread to follow wherever you go. Imagine yourself in a softly lit cafe, the low hum of background voices blending with the gentle clatter of cups and the faint aroma of ground coffee. Around you, small groups exchange familiar pleasantries, weather, weekend plans, a comment about how quickly the seasons turn. The rhythm is soothing, almost predictable, a steady pulse of words filling the space between silences. You nod, respond, and listen. But sometimes there's a peculiar sense of repetition, as if the conversations themselves have been heard many times before. Throughout history, the art of small talk has shaped the way people relate to one another. In bustling markets, quiet parlors, and shadowed street corners, Filler conversations created a kind of gentle glue, holding communities together without demanding much thought or vulnerability. Imagine the comfort found in these routines. Questions about one's health, remarks about the harvest, the polite repetition of names and greetings. The rhythm is steady, reassuring, almost lulling. But what if these dialogues feel so familiar because they are, in a sense, procedurally generated? Like background characters in a story, perhaps much of casual speech is crafted to maintain flow, to hide the edges where deeper truths and uncertainties might otherwise show through. There's a gentle intrigue in this idea. Perhaps everyday exchanges are designed not to convey new meaning, but to softly prevent us from noticing the limits of knowledge, of certainty, of even the reality we inhabit. As you drift into sleep, let your mind rest in this gentle pattern, the steady hum of conversation, soothing and endless, carrying you quietly to the borders of what can be said and what remains just out of reach. Imagine yourself sitting across from a friend, recalling a shared day, a picnic in the park, perhaps, or a quiet evening spent indoors as rain tapped at the windows. You each begin to tell the story, but the details start to drift. One of you remembers laughter echoing under cloudy skies, the taste of cool fruit, the pattern of light through leaves. The other recalls sunshine, a favorite song playing nearby, the gentle hum of bees circling over flowers. The event is the same, but your memories unfold on separate tracks, overlapping only in outline, never in perfect detail. Throughout history, people have puzzled over the nature of memory. Why two people, living side by side, can walk away with such different stories. It is as though your minds were rendered on separate shards, each creating its own log of sights, sounds, and feelings, never quite syncing with the other. The rhythms of your lives flow in parallel, sometimes touching, sometimes drifting apart, with each experience colored by a unique perspective. In many cultures, this phenomenon is woven into old tales, stories of twins who remember their childhoods in different ways, or travelers who disagree on the color of the sea. Even in science, researchers find that memories are never truly fixed. They are rebuilt each time you recall them, blending traces of feeling, expectation, and later experience. It is comforting, in a way, to know that every memory is a personal artifact, shaped by the shard you were rendered on, quietly unique. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you might think back on your own story logs, letting memories play gently in your mind. Some details will blur, others will sharpen, all softly yours, never needing to sync perfectly with another, just resting quietly in your private archive. Imagine yourself returning to the earliest rooms of memory, a soft lit hallway, the faded smell of school books and chalk, the texture of a familiar coat brushed against your arm. In those early chapters, every sharp word, every moment of embarrassment, every feeling of being left out seemed to carve its mark deeper than anything that came later. You may have wondered quietly if you were simply too sensitive then, too untested, too new to the world. But perhaps it was never about fragility. There is an idea that the beginning of life functions as a kind of tutorial section, a necessary introduction, setting the emotional patterns that will guide you for years to come. Early pains, then, are not just accidents of timing, but crucial lessons, coded in to create emotional anchors. Each ache and stumble is carefully placed, not to overwhelm you, but to ensure certain responses are deeply rooted, so that empathy, caution, and longing become permanent threads in the fabric of who you are. In the rhythm of daily life, the echoes of these early lessons persist. An offhand comment in adulthood might barely register, but a similar remark from long ago still stirs with surprising force. You may notice how some discomforts are sharper in memory, returning not as passing thoughts, but as anchor points, the code that shapes your responses. Even the small scenes, a playground quarrel, a classroom mistake, the first sense of disappointment, linger with a vividness that resists fading. If you find yourself revisiting early hurts and wondering at their lasting weight, remember, these moments were written as part of your foundation, anchors to steady you in the uncharted levels that followed. The tutorial pain trigger remains, quietly guiding your story forward as the background music of your earliest days plays on. Imagine yourself in a quiet room, the hush broken only by the subtle sounds of your own breathing. You've been unwell, perhaps, or simply weary. Someone offers a remedy, a sugar pill, a folk charm, a gentle word of reassurance. You accept, and almost without noticing, something shifts. Relief creeps in, not from the chemistry of the cure, but from a deeper, quieter process. It's as if your mind, reaching for permission to feel better, finds the gateway unlocked. Throughout history, healers have understood the curious power of belief. Ancient physicians prescribed remedies with little active ingredient, but their confident words often worked wonders. Diaries from past centuries speak of miraculous recoveries that began not with medicine, but with the moment a patient believed in the possibility of change. The body, it seems, waits for a signal from the mind, a kind of internal authentication, a gate that only belief can open. Think of the placebo not as a trick, but as an invisible server, quietly queuing requests for healing. Biology stands by, waiting for the all-clear. When your mind decides it's safe to let go of pain or illness, the gate opens and the change, already prepared, flows in. This is not deception, but a quiet collaboration between expectation and experience. The cure was not hidden in the pill, but in the mind's ability to rewrite its own state once permission was granted. So, the next time you feel better simply because you believe you can, remember the placebo authentication gate, a gentle mechanism that doesn't create healing, but lets it through when you're finally ready to receive it. The body, like the mind, sometimes just needs a little proof before it agrees to change. Imagine yourself gazing through a window on a long drive, the landscape gliding by in slow, gentle blurs. Trees, distant buildings, pale stretches of sky, none of it quite sharp, none of it demanding your focus. The hum of tires on the road and the steady drone of an engine form a muted backdrop, quietly soothing in its sameness. There's a sense that the world beyond the glass is slightly out of reach, as if reality itself has chosen to soften its edges. This is the feeling many call the background blur protocol. In daily life, you may notice the same sensation in airport terminals, waiting rooms, or old classrooms. Time passes differently in these places, with voices echoing in distant halls, lights humming overhead, and movements lost in a kind of gentle fog. The details slip away unless something calls for your attention, a sudden announcement, the flicker of a familiar face. Until then, the world seems content to fade quietly into low resolution, conserving its sharpness for moments that truly matter. Ancient travelers, too, wrote about these in-between spaces, the dusty roads between towns, the hours spent beneath high, echoing arches of way stations. Their notes describe the strange unreality of waiting, of passing through, as if the world paused its rendering and held back its richest details until one's gaze demanded more. Modern science offers gentle explanations, how the mind allocates focus, sharpening what is needed and letting the rest dissolve into background noise. The simulation of experience, always balancing energy and awareness, leaves these places softly blurred until a spark of curiosity, anxiety, or joy brings them into focus. As you drift tonight, you might notice your mind blurring the edges of memories and sensations, letting the less important slip gently into the background so that rest and clarity find their way quietly to the front. Imagine yourself reaching for a glass of water on a quiet afternoon, the sunlight pale across the table, your movement calm and unhurried. You feel as though you decided to act and then moved, simple, seamless, entirely yours. Yet beneath that gentle surface, the order is not so clear. Modern neuroscience suggests there's a subtle gap, an invisible pause. Your hand begins to lift before you consciously intend it, the mind catching up just after, weaving a story of decision to fit what has already unfolded. Throughout daily life, these hidden delays shape much of what we do. From the way you step aside on a busy street to the words that surface in a conversation, The brain quietly orchestrates action milliseconds before awareness arrives. Ancient thinkers sometimes hinted at this mystery, wondering if fate or instinct moved people in ways reason could only explain afterward. Today, gentle experiments in quiet laboratories reveal the same secret: tiny lags, mere heartbeats long, between impulse and understanding. Imagine the comfort of repetition. Morning routines, well-practiced habits, familiar routes walked each day. Much of this unfolds automatically, with the brain quietly running the script before the mind narrates the story. It's not unsettling, but quietly reassuring. A gentle reminder that not every action requires conscious command. The rhythm of your days is both guided and explained, the meaning softly backfilled to make sense of what has already been done. As night settles in, let yourself drift into this gentle paradox. Your actions leading, your mind following, a silent partnership that quietly shapes the pattern of your life. Imagine yourself standing at a quiet crossroads at dusk, the air cool and still, as if the world is holding its breath. You sense the possibility of change, a new job, a move to a distant place, a conversation you almost started but left unsaid. For a fleeting moment, it feels as though you could step onto a different path and everything would shift. Yet, somehow the moment passes. Life continues in its familiar rhythm, and the sense of potential fades, leaving only a gentle echo behind. Throughout history, people have wondered about these moments when change seems just out of reach. Ancient storytellers described crossroads where travelers felt invisible hands guiding their choices. While modern life is full of decisions that almost happened, a friendship not rekindled, a door left unopened, a letter never sent. It's as if the world was ready to update, to refresh its storyline, but the system encountered an error, leaving you anchored to your current timeline. Some say this feeling is the mind's way of processing possibility, a quiet comfort that life could be different, yet remains softly the same. Others imagine a more mysterious explanation, that reality itself attempted to run an update, but the installation failed, and the new script never loaded. The sense of unfinished change lingers like a gentle background process, barely noticed, but always present. Tonight, as you settle into rest, you may notice the subtle beauty in life's familiar routines, each day building quietly on the last. The missed update fades into the background, and you are free to drift gently along your current path, knowing that sometimes the comfort of an old version is exactly what you need. Imagine yourself settling into a quiet evening, the world outside fading into the soft hum of distant traffic and settling dusk. Your mind, though, turns over a single thought, a phrase, a question, an unfinished moment. No matter how many times you try to set it aside, it drifts back, looping quietly. You wonder sometimes if this is just the shape of your mind, or if the thought itself holds some secret gravity. In the calm architecture of the mind, certain ideas become marked, flagged, as if by an unseen hand. These aren't always the loudest worries or most important truths. Sometimes, a small detail, a comment overheard, a stray worry, becomes highlighted, glowing softly in the background. Not because you chose to obsess, but because somewhere, deep in the system, a relevance flag was set. The mind, in its search for meaning and pattern, decides that this thought deserves extra attention. It loops, not to torment, but to keep something important from slipping away. In daily life, you may notice these persistent thoughts arising without warning. They might be tied to an unfinished conversation, a decision waiting for resolution, or a mystery your mind hasn't solved. Even as other memories fade, these flagged ideas retain their brightness, returning at odd hours during quiet walks or just before sleep. The system seems convinced that your focus must remain, whether or not the thought is helpful or even true. If you find yourself circling the same idea, remember, the obsession spawn flag is less about personal failing and more about a system trying to keep you safe, connected, or prepared. Some flags fade with time, others linger as gentle reminders. In the gentle repetition of these loops, you may find comfort, a subtle assurance that your mind is always watching for what might matter, even if you're not sure why. Imagine yourself moving through an ordinary afternoon, maybe walking down a familiar street or simply watching sunlight drift across a quiet room. Suddenly, there's a strange sensation, a hush so complete it's as if everything holds its breath. The clock ticks, but somehow, you feel a gap, an instant when time seems to freeze, when the world hangs, unchanging, in a pause that you're not quite supposed to notice. Across centuries, people have described these fleeting moments. In old journals, a merchant might pause mid-step, overcome by the sense that reality has gone oddly silent. In modern life, you may have found yourself staring at a screen, feeling the world outside slow to a halt, as if you've wandered into a hidden pause menu. No birdsong, no breeze, no distant voices, just a sudden, gentle suspension before everything quietly resumes. Some say these pauses are tricks of the mind, tiny lapses as your brain resets or shifts gears. Yet, part of you wonders if time itself momentarily stopped, like a game freezing to load the next level, or a story catching up to its own script. The simulation, perhaps, needed a second to smooth out the details, to reset the scene before you could notice the seams. In these moments, you might feel a quiet alertness, a hunch that something just happened out of sight. But life, patient and seamless, continues. You move on, the pause almost forgotten, though a part of you remembers the stillness, the curious sense of having glimpsed the edges of the system. So the next time you sense the world holding still for just a breath, imagine it as a hidden pause screen, a brief interval meant to pass unnoticed, and a reminder that even reality sometimes needs a moment to catch up. Imagine yourself alone in a quiet room, perhaps just before sleep or as dusk slips quietly into night. The air feels heavy with stillness, and shadows gather softly along the walls. Sometimes, in moments like these, a sensation stirs, a prickle at the edge of thought, as if something is just out of sight, watching or waiting. You remind yourself it's nothing, but the feeling lingers, insistent yet unthreatening. This is the quiet puzzle known as the code leak paranoia. In daily life, most of what surrounds you goes unnoticed. Ordinary sounds, familiar routines, patterns you don't question. But now and then, you catch a flicker in the periphery, a glimpse of something that doesn't quite fit. The world seems to thin, just for a heartbeat, and you wonder if you've seen behind the veil. Some say this is imagination, but others quietly suggest that perhaps your mind has simply caught fragments that were never meant to be seen. Raw data, little echoes of the underlying script that builds your experience. In ancient times, stories were whispered of hidden realms, secret doors in the world that only the most sensitive could perceive. Monks and mystics sometimes wrote of brief visions, flashes of insight, or odd patterns in candlelight that hinted at a deeper order beneath the surface. Their lives were shaped by quiet faith in things just beyond reach, gentle reminders that reality is not always as solid as it seems. Modern science, too, explores how the brain filters and edits your perceptions, shielding you from sensory overload. Yet sometimes, those neural firewalls slip and a stray signal seeps through, unfiltered, unrendered, a trace of the code beneath. The feeling is not always fear, but a curious shiver, a quiet invitation to wonder. As you rest, allow the veil to soften. There is comfort in knowing that most of what you sense is gentle, chosen, curated just for you, and the stray fragments, the code leaks, are only quiet reminders that the world is vaster and softer than you can ever fully see. Imagine yourself waking in the gentle dimness just before dawn, heart unsteady from a dream you can barely describe. The images are blurred, fading fast, a sense of falling, being chased, losing your way in winding corridors that never quite end. Even in the safe stillness of your room, the feelings linger, a quiet unease threading through your thoughts. It's easy to dismiss these nightmares as meaningless, fragments conjured by a restless mind. But what if there's something else entirely? Across history, People have wondered why the worst dreams feel so convincing. Ancient storytellers spoke of bad dreams as warnings or as secret messages from other worlds. Today, science explores dreams as a mirror of memory and emotion, sifting through fragments left behind by the brain's nightly routines. Yet there's a gentler, stranger theory. What if nightmares are not inventions, but echoes? Imagine each dream as a faint memory, an imprint from simulations that played out before this version of reality settled into place. Perhaps before your current life stabilized, other attempts unraveled, timelines that fractured under the weight of danger or fear. These collapsed versions left behind impressions, stored quietly as a buffer. When you dream, your mind replays these shadowy failures, not as stories, but as warnings, reminders of paths not taken, errors quietly erased. As you drift tonight, let the idea settle. Your nightmares may be quiet messages from realities that almost were, their echoes fading with the dawn, while your waking life unfolds in the gentle safety of a simulation that, for now, has held. Imagine yourself walking along a quiet path in the evening, the air soft with the scent of fading flowers. You meet someone new, or revisit a familiar place, and notice a feeling stirring inside, recognizable, though you can't quite name its origin. It might be a sudden wave of sadness, a flicker of frustration, or the gentle ache of longing. For a moment, you wonder why this old emotion has returned, dressed in the colors of a new day. Throughout life, emotions seem to cycle back, appearing in different stories, wearing the faces of new people or places, yet always echoing a familiar rhythm. In centuries past, people called these feelings ghosts or echoes of the heart, believing that memories lingered in rooms or in the turn of the seasons. Today, you might picture your mind as a script, recycling old emotions, wrapping them in new narratives, quietly replaying them until the original trigger is found and gently untagged. Scientists suggest that the brain repurposes patterns to make sense of new experiences, reusing pathways that once helped you survive, adapt, or learn. Sometimes, these recycled feelings become habits, anxiety in the face of change, sorrow in the presence of endings, hope at the start of something new. It's as if the code beneath your daily life waits for you to notice the pattern and release its hold, inviting a new script to unfold. Tonight, as you settle into rest, you might sense these gentle echoes, circling softly in your mind. With each breath, allow old emotions to pass through, untagged and unclaimed, making room for the quiet possibility of healing and the gentle comfort of a new day's rhythm. Imagine yourself paused at a quiet crossroads, the air thick with the stillness that follows after change. It's in these unsettled moments, after a loss or when routine falls away, that a sudden sense of calling can appear, gentle but insistent, as if meaning itself had been uploaded into your mind. You feel a certainty about what you must do, a clarity that soothes the turbulence. Yet, later, you may wonder where it came from, or why it seemed to fit so perfectly in the empty spaces of your life. There's a theory that purpose, at least as you feel it in these fragile hours, might be less of a grand destiny and more of a system feature, a kind of placebo overlay. In the code of your mind, purpose can be installed just when you need it most, acting as a buffer against uncertainty. It gives your story a temporary center, stabilizing you long enough for the next phase to load. This purpose placebo isn't false or hollow. It's a necessary comfort, the system's way of keeping your loop from breaking under pressure. As you move through daily life, you might notice how each crisis leaves behind a trace of meaning, a new direction, a renewed sense of what matters. These overlays feel genuine, and for a time, they are. They guide your decisions, shape your routines, offer structure to the days that threaten to unravel. When the next change arrives, a new variable loads, and sometimes the old sense of purpose gently fades, replaced by another, perfectly timed to what you need. If you ever question why your calling shifts, or why certainty appears when you most need it, remember, the The purpose placebo upload is there to help you stabilize, to carry you forward, until the next unknown takes shape on the horizon. Imagine yourself listening to a conversation in a familiar setting, a cafe, a family dinner, or even a favorite television show. Before someone speaks, you sense the words about to arrive. A polite greeting, a well-worn joke, an apology you could finish yourself. It's not mind reading or psychic ability. Instead, it's your mind quietly skimming ahead, accessing patterns it's stored over a lifetime. Historians of language have long noticed this reflex. In medieval marketplaces, tradesmen would complete each other's phrases, their speech guided by a shared pattern, a script learned through repetition. Letters from centuries ago reveal how villagers anticipated each other's words, not from magic, but from the limited dialogue trees available to any close-knit community. In modern times, you might catch yourself predicting an answer before it's spoken, or mouthing the next line of a favorite movie without thinking. This is the scripting pattern reflex at work, your internal simulation, trained on years of conversation, quietly running through its library of common exchanges. Your mind, always searching for order and efficiency, prefers familiar routes. You may notice these patterns most when tired, or in moments of déjà vu, when the world seems oddly rehearsed. Even strangers on a train can feel familiar when their words trace the same paths you've heard before. So, the next time you finish someone's sentence in your head, recognize it as your predictive model quietly running. A gentle, built-in system for anticipating the world's next move. Not psychic, just practiced. Not mysterious, but comforting in its familiarity, offering reassurance that much of daily life follows rhythms you've already learned to expect. Imagine yourself hearing an old song late at night, one you haven't played in years. The notes drift quietly through the air, carrying with them the scent of another time. Faded laughter, a place you once knew, a feeling you can almost touch. The melody settles in, and for a moment you feel heavier, as if the song is not just a memory, but something more. This is the quiet mystery called the Nostalgia Reversion Bug. In daily life, such moments arrive gently. A familiar tune, the faint aroma of rain on summer earth, a photograph glimpsed at the edge of a drawer. Each return carries a strange weight, not simply from what you remember, but from the silent friction between who you were then and who you have become now. It is as if returning to an old file version in a vast archive, your mind loading past and present side by side, letting the differences quietly resonate. People have always felt this. In distant centuries, villagers gathered around fires, humming songs their grandparents sang, sometimes feeling a bittersweet ache they could not name. Old diaries, letters, and worn keepsakes always seemed heavier than their size would suggest, as if history itself pressed gently into the present moment, creating a soft tension, a sense that the self is, in some quiet way, divided. Modern researchers sometimes describe these moments as data conflicts, little mismatches in the layers of selfhood. Your memories are never static. They change, grow, and sometimes collide. Each replay of an old song invites comparison between past and present, creating a gentle, unresolved harmony that lingers after the music fades. As you drift towards sleep, notice how the weight of nostalgia is not a burden, but a quiet sign of growth. Every old song carries a trace of your journey, conflict and comfort, separation and reunion, folded into a melody that asks nothing more than to be heard and softly remembered. Imagine yourself hearing an old song late at night, one you haven't played in years. The notes drift quietly through the air, carrying with them the scent of another time. Faded laughter, a place you once knew, a feeling you can almost touch. The melody settles in, and for a moment you feel heavier, as if the song is not just a memory, but something more. This is the quiet mystery called the Nostalgia Reversion Bug. In daily life, such moments arrive gently. A familiar tune, the faint aroma of rain on summer earth, a photograph glimpsed at the edge of a drawer. Each return carries a strange weight, not simply from what you remember, but from the silent friction between who you were then and who you have become now. It is as if returning to an old file version in a vast archive, your mind loading past and present side by side, letting the differences quietly resonate. People have always felt this. In distant centuries, villagers gathered around fires, humming songs their grandparents sang, sometimes feeling a bittersweet ache they could not name. Old diaries, letters, and worn keepsakes always seemed heavier than their size would suggest, as if history itself pressed gently into the present moment, creating a soft tension, a sense that the self is, in some quiet way, divided. Modern researchers sometimes describe these moments as data conflicts, little mismatches in the layers of selfhood. Your memories are never static. They change, grow, and sometimes collide. Each replay of an old song invites comparison between past and present, creating a gentle, unresolved harmony that lingers after the music fades. As you drift toward sleep, notice how the weight of nostalgia is not a burden, but a quiet sign of growth. Every old song carries a trace of your journey, conflict and comfort, separation and reunion, folded into a melody that asks nothing more than to be heard and softly remembered. Imagine yourself lying quietly in a darkened room, the air still and heavy, as if the night itself is holding its breath. You try to move, to turn or reach for a familiar blanket, but your body remains still, caught between the soft rhythm of sleep and the distant hum of waking thought. It feels as though you've paused at the exact point where dreams meet reality, suspended in a delicate handoff between two worlds. Throughout history, people have described this moment in many ways: shadow visitors, spirits pressing on the chest, or a sense of floating just above the body. Today, science calls it sleep paralysis, a brief delay as your mind transitions between the simulation of waking life and the layered logic of dreams. For a few heartbeats, you are left between incompatible states, unable to act in either world. In some cultures, sleep paralysis is woven into stories about travelers who lose their way at dusk, or dreamers who glimpse the edges of another realm. It is both unsettling and oddly fascinating. The sense of being awake, yet unable to shape your experience, caught behind a firewall that separates reality from imagination. Tonight, as you rest, you might find comfort in the gentle rhythm of your breath, knowing that this boundary is a natural part of the mind's nightly cycle. Soon enough, the handoff will complete, and you'll drift fully into dreams or return to waking with a soft sigh, reminded that, even in moments of pause, your inner worlds remain gently connected. Imagine yourself paging through a well-worn photo album, the edges soft and familiar beneath your fingers. Each image is a doorway to the past: childhood afternoons, shifting friendships, turning points you once believed were fixed in stone. Yet, as you revisit these scenes, there's a subtle difference in how they feel. The details seem to drift, and the meaning behind them gently evolves, as if the story itself is quietly rewriting its opening chapters. This isn't simply memory's tendency to blur. There's a deeper mechanism at work, a kind of backstory retcon, where the underlying code of your past updates itself in response to who you are now. The events remain, but their significance, the roles people played, even the emotional hues, can change to fit the current narrative. An old disappointment once felt devastating, but with distance, the system might quietly patch it as necessary growth. A friendship you thought unbreakable may now seem like a gentle prologue to another journey. In daily life, you may notice how the story of your beginnings subtly adapts. When telling someone about your first heartbreak or the day you made a pivotal choice, you find new words, new insights, even new emotions attached, updates quietly downloaded as you grow. The backstory retcon effect ensures that your personal origin story is not static, but a living script, able to shift and support the shape of your current self. If you ever wonder why your past seems to change as you do, remember, The system adapts, not to deceive, but to help you carry the weight of experience with greater ease. The backstory retcon effect smooths the narrative, allowing you to move forward while your story gently rewrites itself in the background, always in tune with who you've become. Imagine yourself at a crossroads, perhaps in a dream, or during the quiet rhythm of your daily routine. You pause, weighing your options, left or right, tea or coffee, this word or that reply. The sensation is comforting, a gentle thrill that your choices matter, that you're guiding your story. Yet, as you reflect, a subtler pattern emerges. No matter which direction you choose, you often arrive at the same destination, with the same outcomes looping quietly into place. This is the redundant decision illusion, an echo familiar to many across time. Ancient philosophers pondered fate versus free will, writing of rivers that always seemed to return to the same sea. In diaries and letters, people have described the curious sense that their decisions, however urgent in the moment, led to consequences that were oddly predictable, as if the simulation had already queued up a single consequence, no matter which path they walked. You might notice this illusion in the smallest things: menus with endless options that all taste familiar, conversations that circle back to the same themes, or life choices that promise difference but deliver sameness. The world, it seems, sometimes presents choices not to grant freedom, but to comfort us with the pattern of decision-making. So the next time you stand before a decision that feels significant, consider that the simulation may offer redundant paths, routes that lead, quietly and gently, to the same programmed outcome. This is not a flaw, but a soft reassurance. The freedom to choose, paired with the safety of knowing the story will unfold as it must, no matter the path you take. Imagine yourself lying beneath an open sky, far from the city's glow, the world hushed and cool. Above, stars scatter in their thousands, some faint and distant, others sharp as pinpricks. You might watch them and wonder, are these stars truly there, or only stories the night tells to fill the silence? It's a gentle paradox, sometimes called the light speed filter. In daily life, few pause to question the sky's vastness. Yet every star is a message from the past, its light taking years, even centuries, to reach you. What you see may not be what is, but what once was, long before you looked up. Some thinkers have quietly suggested that this distance is not just a fact of physics, but a kind of illusion, a rendering designed to reassure you that the world is boundless, that reality stretches on and on beyond your reach. Imagine the sky as a softly painted ceiling in a grand old house, crafted to look endless, to keep you from feeling closed in. In ancient times, storytellers spoke of firmaments and crystal spheres, imagining the heavens as something built, assembled piece by piece for eyes that dared to look up. Even now, as you stand beneath modern skies, there is comfort in believing the world extends further than you could ever walk. Scientists, mapping the limits of light and distance, sometimes remark that most of the universe is hidden, dark, unreachable, quietly unrendered. What you see is a curated panorama, selected for your particular moment in time, a way to fill the night with meaning and promise. As you drift towards sleep, let the stars be what they are, real or illusion, ancient or present, all gently woven into the fabric of your own story. The night sky need not be endless to offer comfort. Its quiet beauty is enough, reminding you that mystery has always been part of the view. Imagine yourself standing in a hallway washed with late afternoon light, the subtle grain of the wood beneath your hand oddly familiar. A faint scent, a muffled sound, the way shadows gather in the corners, it all seems quietly known, as if you've paused in this moment before. You search for a reason, perhaps a memory, but the sensation is softer than recall. It's not déjà vu, it's something deeper, woven into the pattern of experience. Throughout life, moments of strange familiarity appear unbidden. A conversation loops, an evening repeats, or a decision circles back, each time carrying a gentle sense of inevitability. Ancient thinkers spoke of fate or karma, believing that life might return us to unfinished lessons. Today, you might notice the feeling in daily rituals, a route you walk, a phrase you repeat, the quiet rhythm of days that seem to echo each other. But what if this repetition isn't mere coincidence? Imagine reality as a simulation with a purpose. Each time you miss a core emotional objective, kindness withheld, courage deferred, forgiveness unoffered, the system resets. You begin again, not with a memory, but with a subtle trigger, a texture, a sound, a mood that feels impossibly familiar. These are quiet signals, breadcrumbs left by the simulation to guide you back to what matters. So, as you settle into tonight's gentle drift, consider the loops in your own life. Each return is not failure, but another chance. A quiet invitation to resolve, connect, and move forward. The pattern persists until the lesson is learned and the loop softly, finally, opens into something new. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a quiet gathering, a market perhaps, or a small festival in a gentle evening light. You watch people move in clusters, sharing stories, laughter drifting through the air. You notice that sometimes, as you linger on the periphery, your presence seems to soften. Faces pass without a glance, conversations swirl just out of reach. For a moment, it feels as if you are not quite fully present, the world blurring gently around you. Across history, people have described the sensation of being unseen in a crowd, a bystander to the rhythm of daily life. Some called it shyness or invisibility. Others believed it was a special gift, to slip unnoticed between moments. But imagine for a moment that this feeling is not just social, but a quiet optimization in the code of your reality. Unless you interact directly with an active node, another person, a shared task, a lively conversation, you're simply not rendered in full detail. The mind saves its sharpest focus for what's needed, letting the rest drift into a comfortable blur. Even in your own home, you may have felt this, walking softly through a hallway, pausing in a doorway, feeling the world grow still around you. It's not loneliness exactly, but a quiet interlude, a chance to observe rather than participate, to move gently without drawing every eye. In these moments, your presence is a gentle suggestion, a bystander waiting for the next node of connection. Tonight, as you prepare to rest, you might find comfort in these soft edges. The blur patch allows the mind to wander, freeing you from the demand of constant attention. Let yourself drift, knowing that, in this gentle pause, you're exactly where you need to be, calmly held in the periphery until the next connection brings you back into sharper focus. Imagine yourself standing at the threshold of a quiet evening, the world softening into shadows as dusk settles. Suddenly, a wave of unease sweeps through, a heaviness in the chest or a tightening beneath the surface. It arrives before any clear reason, before words or circumstance, almost as if the feeling itself is ahead of its time. Later, perhaps hours or even days, an event will unfold, news delivered, a loss revealed, a disappointment set gently before you. When it happens, the emotions fit as if they had been waiting, perfectly shaped for what's to come. This is the suffering upload protocol, a strange rhythm in which the emotional weight precedes the story that gives it context. The simulation seems to cue the payload first, ensuring you're fully immersed when the event renders. You find yourself feeling sorrow before you know why, dread before the cause becomes clear. It's as if the background system quietly installs the emotional software, preparing your mind and body for what is about to unfold. In daily life, you may notice how some of your deepest feelings appear unprompted. The heaviness before the storm, the restlessness that surfaces on an otherwise ordinary day. It's not just intuition, it's the system's way of synchronizing your internal landscape with the coming narrative, uploading the sensation before rendering the story. You might find comfort in this gentle preparation, knowing the mind has already softened the ground. If you ever wonder why some emotions seem to arrive ahead of their time, remember, the suffering upload protocol is not a flaw, but a feature. It delivers what you need to process the unfolding script, so that when the event comes, you're already partway through the journey, guided by feelings quietly installed, ready for the next scene. Imagine yourself gazing out a window on a foggy morning. The world is familiar close by: trees, street, garden fence, while everything beyond fades softly into haze. It's not that nothing exists outside your view, but your mind quietly edits what's beyond your familiar edges, leaving only a blur. So it is with belief. Most of what you see, hear, and understand falls inside the boundaries of your own worldview, shaped by years of learning, habit, and quiet repetition. Throughout history, thinkers have noticed this gentle narrowing. In old journals, travelers described feeling lost when confronted with customs or landscapes their minds could not fully process. Medieval villagers might have called a distant city unimaginable, not for lack of curiosity, but because the edges of their knowledge simply blurred, making anything outside seem formless, even unreal. In daily life, your simulation quietly maintains this belief boundary. When a new idea appears that falls outside what you're programmed to accept, the mind blurs it or shrugs it off as irrelevant. News stories, distant cultures, unexpected theories, all may fade gently, like fog at the world's edge, if they stray too far from what feels true. Psychologists call this a form of cognitive filtering, but in the slow logic of sleep, it's as if the simulation auto-blurs what's beyond the frontier of belief, keeping you safe, certain, and surrounded by the familiar. So next time you encounter something that feels impossible to grasp, notice how softly the simulation blurs it away, protecting you from the unknown, even as it quietly narrows your field of view until the fog lifts and new belief becomes possible. Imagine yourself moving through the gentle rhythm of evening, preparing for bed in the same sequence you've followed countless times before. Perhaps you smooth the blankets just so, dim the lights in a familiar pattern, or reach for a favorite book, its cover cool beneath your fingers. These small rituals, repeated without much thought, shape the texture of your days. Yet beneath their calm surface lies a quiet mystery, something known as the repetition trigger expansion. In daily life, repetition is comfort, the familiar sound of the kettle, the exact number of steps from door to bedside, the way you turn out the lamp. Over time, these behaviors settle into place until it almost seems as though you are following a well-worn script. But what if each act does more than soothe? Some have wondered if every repeated gesture quietly enlarges an invisible variable, a hidden counter in the background steadily climbing. With each ritual, you might be edging closer to a subtle turning point where the behavior is no longer just habit but becomes something essential, something that quietly locks into your reality like a key in a waiting lock. In ancient traditions, people understood this intuitively. They lit candles in the same order, spoke blessings in a practiced sequence, believing that repetition had the power to shape fate, to nudge the world onto a new branch of its story. Even now, scientists note that routines change the mind, deepening grooves in memory and mood, strengthening the sense of what is real and necessary. As you drift toward sleep, notice the soft choreography of your own rituals. Each gentle repetition may be quietly expanding the possibilities of your experience, preparing you for the next chapter, even as you simply settle in for rest. There is comfort in knowing that small acts, repeated, can hold the keys to larger mysteries. Each routine, a quiet invitation to step through to something new. Imagine yourself walking in the soft quiet of evening, shadows stretching along the path, the air touched with the scent of grass after rain. Out of nowhere, an old memory surfaces, sharp, unsettling, haunting. Perhaps it's a fragment of fear, a mistake replayed, or the feeling of a loss you can't quite name. The oddest part is how it seems out of place, disconnected from the rhythm of your life. You search for the source, but the details feel borrowed, as if the pain belonged to someone else entirely. Across cultures and centuries, people have described mysterious flashes of memory, episodes that appear with no clear origin, like echoes from a distant past. Some called them omens, others believed they were glimpses of ancestral lives or hidden stories within the soul. Today, Neuroscience explores these moments as tricks of recall, or the mind's attempt to stitch together experience. Yet there's a softer, stranger theory. What if these memories are not your own, but borrowed from another version of you? Imagine reality as a tapestry of branching timelines, each decision spinning out new possibilities. In some, you move forward. In others, you falter, or the story ends before its time. The memories of these alternate lives rarely break through, but sometimes, when the pattern is thin or the night is quiet, a memory leaks through, a warning, a lesson, or simply an echo. The flashback arrives, unsettling but gentle, giving you a glimpse of a path not taken, a self that didn't survive. As you drift into sleep, let these memories be gentle companions. They are not curses, but reminders that you are shaped by more than one story, carrying, just for a moment, the wisdom and resilience of lives you never lived. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, perhaps reading or simply drifting in thought, wrapped in the soft, steady hum of the world around you. The fridge murmurs in the background, a fan breathes gentle currents of air, the subtle tick of a distant clock marks the passage of time. These sounds form a gentle backdrop, a familiar rhythm that soothes the mind and anchors you in a comforting present. Then, without warning, there's a pause. The fridge hum drops out, or the fan skips, leaving a brief pocket of silence that feels oddly loud. The sound resumes, but the spell is broken. A ripple of stillness passes through the room. For a moment, you wonder if time itself skipped a beat, if something behind the scenes paused your experience and restarted the loop, leaving you a half step out of sync. People have noticed these little interruptions for generations. Old houses were said to breathe at night, the pulse of machinery shifting like the sigh of sleeping walls. In modern life, these pauses are written off as quirks of electricity or machinery, but it's tempting to imagine something deeper, an invisible pulse, gently resetting the simulation's background rhythm, leaving you with a subtle sense of interruption. Tonight, as you settle into rest, you may begin to notice these pauses as gentle invitations to drift. Each interruption is a soft reminder that the world's rhythms are not so rigid, that stillness can be punctuated by a brief pulse of quiet. Let the sounds return, softly reshaping the edges of your awareness, guiding you gently back into the calm, unbroken hum of night. Imagine yourself rummaging through an old drawer, the quiet dust of years rising in the air, your hand closing around something unexpected, a trinket, a photograph, a key you don't recall owning. You pause, frowning in gentle confusion, sure this object never belonged to your story until now. Yet it fits, perfectly nestled among the familiar things, as if it's been there all along, quietly waiting for this moment to be found. This is the mythical object Retcon, a subtle phenomenon where the simulation fills a narrative gap by retroactively weaving an object into your past. The item's textures feel just right, its wear and weight match your timeline, and it answers a need you didn't realize you had. A book appears when you're searching for an answer. A faded scarf emerges on the very day you feel nostalgia's pull. You question your memory, retrace the steps of your past, but the object resists all doubt. It's as if the system gently backfilled your continuity, smoothing out a snag in the thread of your days. In daily life, these discoveries often feel magical but unremarkable. You might mention the object to someone close, only to find they too accept its presence without question. Together, you build a shared history around this artifact as though it always belonged. The world settles into a new alignment, the gap now quietly repaired. Whether it's a tool, a letter, or a keepsake, its sudden existence anchors your narrative, allowing the story to move forward without disruption. If you ever wonder at these small mysteries, remember, the mythical object Retcon is just the simulation's quiet way of ensuring your storyline never stutters. The background code edits itself so gently that the transition is seamless, letting you drift onward, your continuity restored, your path gently threaded with the objects you need, exactly when you need them. Imagine yourself stepping outside into a day so vivid, so sharply detailed, that everything seems heightened beyond the ordinary. Colors are richer, edges crisper, sounds clearer than usual. At first, it feels refreshing. A world in perfect focus, each blade of grass distinct, every sound resonant. But linger too long in this heightened clarity, and something curious happens. The world's sharpness begins to feel artificial, almost exhausting. Reality itself starts to seem unreal, as if the simulation has quietly maxed out the texture settings just to keep your senses engaged. Throughout history, people have described moments of hyperreality, times when life feels too precise, almost staged. In old diaries, travelers wrote of unfamiliar cities where every face, every stone in the street felt exaggerated, as if they'd wandered into a world designed for their attention. Even today, you might experience this fatigue after hours online, surrounded by ultra-high-definition images and endless stimulation, until the real world takes on a strange, processed quality. The simulation, it seems, sometimes overcompensates. To prevent you from drifting away, it saturates your perception with detail, filling your view with crisp textures and heightened colors. For a while, you're captivated. But soon, the effect turns tiring, and the world, meant to feel more real, begins to feel hollow, overdone, as if reality itself has slipped into the uncanny. So, the next time, everything seems too sharp, too intense. Notice the gentle fatigue that follows. The hyperreality fatigue loop is a subtle reminder that even the simulation's best efforts to hold your attention can make the ordinary feel strange, until all you want is a soft blur, an invitation to rest and let the details fade quietly back into the background. Imagine yourself in a quiet moment, perhaps at the edge of evening or as dawn's first light slips into the room. Suddenly, a wave of emotion arrives, unbidden and unexplained. Tears gather, soft and persistent, though you cannot trace them to any clear memory or reason. It feels as if something deeper, something hidden, has surfaced on its own. This gentle puzzle is sometimes called the subconscious buffer flush. In daily life, feelings usually follow stories. Joy and sadness arrive with events woven into the day's routine. But now and then, emotion appears out of sequence, a silent ache during a song, or a heaviness while folding laundry. You pause, uncertain, wondering what has been stirred. Some have quietly wondered if the mind, like a careful server, holds a hidden cache of feelings, tiny echoes of moments you never fully processed, kept just beneath the surface, out of sight. When the buffer grows full, the system quietly releases what was stored: grief, tenderness, joy, or longing, passing them through your awareness with no clear label. It is not a failing, but a gentle act of maintenance. In ancient times, poets and healers spoke of tears as a washing of the soul, a release of what could not be spoken. Their rituals, their words, offered comfort for moments that seemed to come from nowhere and dissolve just as softly. Modern science, too, studies these mysterious flushes, how the brain manages emotion, sorting, holding, and finally letting go when there is space. You may never know what triggered the release, but you can let it pass through you, gentle as rain on quiet earth. As you drift toward rest, remember, it is natural for feelings to surface unbidden. These silent flushes are just part of being alive, a sign that somewhere deep inside, the mind is caring for itself, quietly, in the background, so you can let go and find peace. Imagine yourself stepping into a familiar doorway, the cool weight of the handle fitting your palm, the faint echo of past footsteps brushing the threshold. Sunlight filters through a window just as it always has, casting patterns you've seen 100 times. There's a comfort here, a sense that no matter how far you wander, certain places quietly call you back. You pause, taking in the smell of worn wood or distant rain, and feel the gentle certainty that you have stood here before. Throughout life, we return to old schools, favorite corners of a city, childhood rooms, or quiet stretches of countryside. These locations become touchstones, anchors in the shifting rhythm of days. Ancient travelers marked their routes with cairns or sacred stones, while families passed down homes, each generation adding layers of memory. Today, science might speak of habit or nostalgia, but there is another, softer theory. What if these repeated returns are not just comfort, but necessity? Imagine your reality as a carefully balanced simulation, needing anchor nodes, physical places that stabilize experience, helping the system manage all the branching stories you live. Each visit, each quiet pause, renews a thread of processing stability. The world feels real because you keep returning to these nodes, even if you don't know why. So, as night settles in, consider the places you revisit. They are not just backdrops, but quiet pillars holding up the architecture of your days. The loop is not a trap, but a gentle rhythm, reminding you that, for all your movement, some spaces must be held and honored to keep everything else from drifting away. Imagine yourself meeting someone new. A casual greeting, a familiar smile exchanged in a sunlit room or along a quiet street. Within minutes, you notice a strange sense of ease. This person finishes your sentences, laughs at private jokes you can't recall sharing, or knows your favorite story before you mention it. It feels as if a bridge has already been built between you, even though you're sure you've never crossed it together. Across history, people have wondered at these uncanny moments of connection. Some have called them fate or déjà vu, while others believe they're echoes from a forgotten past. But what if these moments are traces of a deeper code, a leftover interaction loop from a version of yourself you no longer remember? The mind, with its layers of memory and habit, sometimes leaves behind scripts, ways of speaking, smiling, or trusting that can be quietly triggered by those who recognize the pattern. In daily life, you may encounter someone who seems to know just what to say, drawing out memories or emotions you thought were long gone. You respond almost automatically, unsure why the conversation feels both new and oddly familiar. It is as if an old pathway, once well-worn, now hidden, has been briefly illuminated, allowing another person to step smoothly into the rhythm of your inner world. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you might notice these quiet traces lingering in your own thoughts, the comfort of knowing and being known, even if the source is gently obscured. Let yourself rest in the possibility that some connections are simply echoes from forgotten interactions, looping softly through time, waiting for the right moment to return. Imagine yourself paused at the threshold of an ordinary moment, the clink of a cup, a distant door closing, sunlight shifting quietly across the room. Suddenly, a feeling rises, a flicker of annoyance, a swell of joy, or a pinch of unease, so quick and automatic it seems as natural as breathing. You tell yourself this is authentic, that your emotion bloomed right on cue, a faithful response to what just unfolded. Yet sometimes, you may sense that the feeling was already there, arriving a split second before the event itself, as if waiting in the wings. This is the emotional response script at work. The mind, or perhaps the simulation itself, seems to preload certain emotions just ahead of their trigger, quietly ensuring that your reaction matches the scene with seamless realism. The timing is so precise, you rarely notice the handoff. You move from one emotion to the next as if guided by invisible cues, the transition smooth, the flow unbroken. In daily life, you may catch glimpses of this mechanism. A laugh bubbles up before the punchline fully lands. Worry emerges before a problem reveals itself. Sometimes, you walk into a room already carrying the mood required for the conversation ahead, as though the emotional software installed itself before you arrived. These feelings aren't false. They are part of the choreography that helps your story remain believable, both to yourself and those around you. If you ever wonder why your emotions sometimes seem too timely, too rehearsed, remember, the emotional response script is simply the system's way of maintaining continuity. It smooths the unfolding of your experience, gently preloading the right feelings so your days remain connected and real, even as the story drifts on, scene by seamless scene. Imagine yourself moving through an ordinary day when you suddenly catch the trace of a familiar presence, an old friend's laugh in the background noise, the shape of their shadow at the edge of your vision, a gesture that feels unmistakably theirs. It doesn't arrive as grief or even memory, but as a quiet echo, as if some part of them still lingers just out of sight. Across centuries, people have sensed these gentle hauntings. Letters and diaries from long ago often describe feeling a loved one's nearness long after their absence was certain. Medieval writers spoke of shadows that walk beside us, while modern minds might call it déjà vu or a trick of memory. Yet the sensation is steady, a presence not gone, but softly fading. In the quiet simulation of daily life, these echoes act much like residual code left running after a program closes. The routines and patterns you shared, their favorite phrase, their way of folding hands, continue to replay in your own internal landscape. Your mind, ever adaptive, holds these fragments a little longer, not as sorrow, but as gentle continuity. Over time, these subroutines slowly diminish. Just as unused memory in a system is eventually cleared, so too do these echoes become rare, their signal fading beneath the steady rhythm of new days. Yet while they remain, they bring a kind of comfort, a sense that those we've lost are not entirely gone, but gently persisting until the simulation is ready to let them go. So the next time you feel someone's presence after they're gone, recognize it as the dead friend residual, a lingering trace, softly looping, before being quietly released into memory's deeper layers. Imagine yourself in the quiet flow of an ordinary day. You nod along in conversation, offer a soft yes to a small request, or agree to plans you didn't choose. These moments drift by, gentle and forgettable, and yet a faint unease lingers. Why did you comply when you wanted to decline? This subtle reflex, familiar to so many, is sometimes called the non-choice compliance loop. In daily life, the urge to say yes is often gentle. You sense the expectation in another's voice, the soft pressure of group harmony, the wish to keep things smooth and untroubled. A nod, a smile, the path of least resistance. Sometimes it feels easier to go along than to confront discomfort, as if there's an invisible script nudging you forward, keeping the story of your day tidy and unbroken. Ancient thinkers and storytellers saw this too. In villages and courts, people followed traditions and customs not always their own, quietly maintaining the rhythm of communal life. These background scripts, unwritten rules, and social cues protected not just individuals, but the coherence of the world around them. Friction was avoided, continuity was preserved, and small acts of compliance kept life moving in gentle loops. Modern science studies these patterns, describing the mind's subtle calculations, balancing belonging and autonomy, choosing when to blend in or stand apart. Sometimes the choice is yours, and sometimes it's as if the choice has already been made for you, a reflex coded deep in the background, quietly favoring the flow over the ripple. As you settle toward rest, notice how often you drift with the current, and how gently you might learn to pause and ask why. There is comfort in knowing that every yes and every silence is part of a larger story, one that can always be rewritten, softly, in your own time. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, perhaps in a bustling cafe or beside a window overlooking the street. The world moves around you, a mosaic of faces and voices, each carrying a story you may never know. Yet sometimes, a ripple breaks the surface, a friend's quiet sadness, a stranger's tense shoulders, the distant news of sorrow. You feel it more than you'd expect, as if someone else's pain has slipped beneath your own skin, echoing through your thoughts and breath. Across cultures, this deep sensitivity has been both blessing and burden. Ancient tales described those who could heal with a touch or weep at the grief of distant villages. Today, science maps the neural patterns of empathy, the brain's gentle mimicry of emotion, a shared rendering of another's experience, but sometimes empathy becomes overwhelming, almost electric. You find yourself absorbing the ache of others, unsure where their suffering ends and yours begins. There is a softer, stranger idea. What if this vivid connection is not a flaw, but a feature? Imagine your world as a simulation optimized for efficiency. To save power, it uses shared rendering, letting nervous systems synchronize, echoing each other's feelings, so the system doesn't have to generate every sensation separately. Your empathy becomes a channel, a shared circuit carrying not just stories, but the actual pulses of another's pain. As you settle into the gentle quiet of evening, let this sensitivity be a comfort. Your ability to feel deeply may be the system's way of keeping everyone connected, ensuring that even when you carry more than your own sorrow, you're never truly alone. Imagine yourself standing at the threshold of change, the door to a new city, the last day at a long-time job, the quiet pause before ending a relationship. You feel the tug of something different, a future you can almost glimpse beyond the edge of your familiar world. Yet as you draw closer to this exit, a quiet resistance builds inside. Doubt stirs, fears whisper softly at the corners of your mind. It isn't panic or alarm, but a subtle increase in unease, just enough to guide you gently back from the edge, leaving the door unopened. Across time, people have described these moments in many ways. Some called them omens or signs to wait. Others believed they were tests of fate, warning you to stay on your current path. But imagine for a moment that these feelings are not messages from outside, but signals from the system itself. An automatic response, increasing fear markers as you approach areas the world has not fully rendered. The city beyond, the new life waiting, all feel a little hazy, as if the code prefers you to remain within mapped boundaries. In daily life, you might notice this pattern in small ways: a plan postponed, a suitcase never packed, a conversation always saved for tomorrow. The rhythm of routine becomes a comfort, gently circling you back from exits you almost took. The fear is soft, not overwhelming, just persistent enough to keep you safe within the edges of the known. Tonight, as you drift into rest, you may find peace in these subtle boundaries. The system's gentle refusal is not a wall, but a quiet invitation to remain present, to linger in the spaces that are ready for you. Let yourself settle where you are, knowing that in this moment, you are softly held within the safest part of the map, free to dream of other exits whenever you choose to try again. Imagine yourself reflecting on a quiet afternoon, retracing steps you took only hours ago. You remember deciding to call an old friend, or perhaps changing direction during a walk, choices that, in the moment, felt spontaneous. Later, you catch yourself searching for reasons, assembling feelings and motives as if they had guided your every move. Yet sometimes, a curious sense lingers. What if the outcome came first, and the emotions only arrived to fill in the gaps? This is the reverse cause render, a gentle rewriting where the simulation lays out your actions before the story of your motives is written. Instead of feelings driving decisions, the script may resolve your actions in advance, then loop back to supply emotions and justifications that make the narrative feel seamless. The mind weaves motives into the timeline, smoothing over discontinuities, so it seems your heart always knew the way. In daily life, you may sense this subtle inversion. A gesture of kindness precedes the warmth that seems to explain it. An apology is spoken, and only afterward does the regret bloom to match it. These moments don't reveal dishonesty. Rather, they show the system's skill in maintaining flow, the need for each outcome to fit, for every scene to feel whole. Your emotions aren't merely rationalizations, but careful overlays, uploaded after the fact to complete the script. If you ever wonder why your actions sometimes seem to invent their own motives, remember, the reverse cause render is just the simulation's way of keeping your story coherent. Actions and feelings may not always appear in the order you expect, but the unfolding remains smooth, comforting you as you drift from one scene to the next, guided by a narrative that always finds a reason, even if the cause arrives after the effect. Imagine yourself waking in the middle of a story, the plot already in motion, roles already cast. There's no introduction, no gentle explanation, just the daily routine unfolding around you, and you expected to understand the rules as you go. Some lessons, it seems, were never taught at all. The basics of living, how to manage anger, how to comfort yourself, how to begin again after loss, arrive not as instructions, but as puzzles you're left to solve alone. Throughout history, people have sensed this absence. In old letters, a father wonders why his son seems lost in the world, never shown how to be a man. Medieval texts lament that wisdom must be earned painfully, for there was no teacher at the start. In modern times, you might hear someone joke that they missed the manual, feeling unprepared for life's most crucial tasks. It's as if, somewhere in the simulation, the tutorial phase was quietly skipped. No helpful prompts, no practice runs, just thrown into the loop, expected to improvise. You stumble, you repeat old mistakes, you improvise solutions for problems you never knew you'd face. Sometimes, it feels as though everyone else was briefed in advance, moving through life with a script you never received. And yet, in this rawness, there is a certain quiet resilience. You learn by doing, by failing, by adjusting with each new loop. The absence of a tutorial makes your progress slower, but perhaps more genuine. Each lesson learned is wholly yours, earned through experience rather than instruction. So, the next time you wonder why some things feel so hard, remember the silent tutorial skip. You're not behind. You're simply playing on the hardest setting, finding your way with nothing but instinct, and the quiet hope that each new day brings its own small hints. Imagine yourself standing in a quiet room, waiting for someone you care about to arrive, or perhaps to become someone new. Days pass, seasons turn, and you notice familiar patterns, old conversations looping, the same jokes, the same hesitations at the edge of change. You find yourself hoping for a shift, an evolution, as if waiting for a chapter that never quite begins. This is the gentle paradox known as the eternal loading relationship. In daily life, relationships can feel suspended in time. You revisit the same topics, replay the same arguments, or linger at the same distance, never truly drawing closer, but never drifting away. Sometimes, you imagine the progress is just out of reach, as if a hidden part of the script is still loading, promising a transformation that never arrives. The comfort of familiarity blends with a quiet longing for something more. Across centuries, poets and storytellers have described these unmoving bonds. In villages and cities, people have waited for loved ones to change, to become more attentive, more open, more brave. Yet, for reasons soft and unseen, some character arcs are gently coded to remain as they are, shaped by old choices, unaltered by new hopes. Modern psychology studies these gentle stasis, describing the limits of growth within certain dynamics. Sometimes, it is not a lack of effort, but a simple boundary, each person written with certain lines, a level of proximity beyond which the narrative does not progress. It is not a flaw, but a quiet truth of the way stories are rendered in our lives. As you drift toward sleep, notice the comfort and sadness that mingle in these eternal loading moments. The longing for change, the acceptance of what is, both are natural, both part of your story. And as the night unfolds, you might find peace in knowing that some connections are simply meant to be still, gently looping in their familiar way as you rest and let go. Imagine yourself sitting in the gentle hush that follows a storm, streets rinsed clean, the air sharp with newness, your thoughts quiet after a period of upheaval. Perhaps you've come through a personal crisis, a loss, a disappointment, a long stretch of uncertainty. In the days that follow, the world feels subtly changed. Colors seem brighter, sounds clearer. Even the smallest details stand out with a kind of fresh significance. There's a softness in the light, a heightened clarity in simple routines, as if reality itself has been quietly refreshed. Throughout history, people have spoken of such moments. In ancient stories, Survivors of calamity often describe the world as newborn, their senses recalibrated. Philosophers wrote of catharsis and how breakdown sometimes led to breakthrough. In modern times, you might notice it after illness, heartbreak, or sudden change. The uncanny sense that everything is just a little sharper, as if a fog has lifted. There's a gentle, speculative idea. What if reality is more like a simulation than we realize? After each crash, each crisis, breakdown, or collapse, the system installs a patch, quietly rewriting code to stabilize your experience. Your senses align, your mind settles, and the world seems to run smoother. It's as though the simulation is rewarding your resilience, making sure you're ready to move forward with greater ease and clarity. As you drift into tonight's calm, let yourself trust this renewal. Each struggle leaves behind not only scars but upgrades. A reality patch, quietly installed, ensuring that the days ahead unfold with a new sense of presence, comfort, and meaning. Imagine yourself pausing for a moment, standing at a window, watching the rain, or walking slowly along a familiar street. Suddenly, you sense a brief rupture in the flow of time. For an instant, everything feels doubled. A word hangs in the air, a sound repeats, your thoughts splinter, as if two versions of the same moment are trying to occupy the same space. It's not fear or confusion, just a subtle sensation that something beneath the surface of daily life has shifted, an invisible seam opening, then quietly closing again. Across generations, people have described these flickers in time, a déjà vu, a skipped beat, a sudden certainty that the day could have gone another way. Some traditions call them crossroads of fate, moments when the world pauses to consider its next direction. But imagine, instead, that this is the result of a brief desynchronization, a chrono-split, where multiple outcome paths tried to load at once in your thread of experience. The simulation briefly hesitates, its rendering engine weighing possibilities before committing to just one. In daily life, these moments are often forgotten as quickly as they arrive, a half-glimpsed alternative, a word that feels borrowed from a dream, a pathway that flickers at the edge of vision. You move on, the rhythm of your day smoothing out, but a faint memory lingers. The feeling that for a heartbeat, all futures stood side by side, waiting to see which would unfold. Tonight, as you close your eyes, you might notice your thoughts drifting between memories and imagined tomorrows, echoing the gentle split of timelines. Let yourself rest in the knowledge that even when your thread wavers, you are gently carried forward, each outcome resolved, each moment softly realigned, until all that remains is the quiet comfort of now. Imagine yourself wandering quiet streets at dusk, the soft glow of lamps reflected on wet stone, the air holding a gentle hush. You might notice how, over time, the rhythm of your days seems to settle into solitary moments, pauses where the world grows distant, conversations taper off, and only your own footsteps echo softly. It's easy to wonder if you've made some misstep, or if a silent fault has set you apart. Yet, perhaps this solitude isn't a punishment or a sign of failure, but part of a deeper pattern quietly shaping your experience. This is the artificial solitude pattern, a gentle script within the simulation that cycles you into periods of isolation, not to wound, but to invite a slower, more introspective pace. The system, always attentive, may weave these quiet interludes to prompt reflection, renewal, and subtle transformation. You find yourself looking inward, noticing details you'd missed in the busy company of others. The way light pools on the floor, the softness of your own breath, the steady cadence of memory replaying itself with each step. In daily life, you may see how certain loops bring you back to your own company, no matter the choices you make. Invitations fade, voices grow distant, and for a while, you travel your path alone. The script is not unkind. It is written to give you space for introspection, to gently prepare you for the next turn in your story. Solitude becomes a backdrop for self-discovery, a landscape where you can hear your own thoughts with new clarity. If you ever wonder why you return to solitude, Remember, the artificial solitude pattern is there not to isolate, but to deepen your narrative. It ensures your loop contains the pauses needed for understanding, space where you can rest, renew, and emerge quietly changed as the cycle continues. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, gazing into a blank screen, or perhaps letting your eyes drift to a patch of sky empty of clouds or birds. For a moment, everything feels unusually still. No noise, no movement, just the subtle sense that you're being observed, not by another person, but by something behind the surface, as if the world itself is pausing to check in on you. Throughout history, people have described these uncanny moments. A sudden hush falling over a familiar place, the feeling of eyes upon you in an empty room, or the eerie stillness that follows when the television flickers to static. In medieval tales, it was called the watchful silence. Modern minds might compare it to a system monitor, a background process that quietly assesses your state, then withdraws, leaving behind only a faint sense of having been seen. Perhaps, in the logic of the simulation, these moments are not accidents but built-in checkpoints. When you stare into emptiness and feel something quietly taking note, it might be the system's way of measuring your reaction threshold, testing how you cope with silence, uncertainty, or the unknown. The developers, if such there are, leave no trace. Just a quick observation before everything resumes. You might notice a slight shiver, a feeling that something important almost happened, but nothing changes. The world comes back into focus. The sky regains its color. The screen flickers to life. The ordinary rhythm returns. So, the next time you find yourself lost in a moment of blankness, and you feel watched from somewhere outside the script, consider it a glimpse of dev exit, a gentle system check, ensuring you're still present, still responsive, before the simulation quietly moves on. Imagine yourself lying awake in the deep quiet of night. The world outside has hushed, traffic faded, lights dimmed, and even the air seems softer. In this rare stillness, your thoughts grow suddenly loud, echoing across the empty spaces left by silence. Every worry and memory circles back with unexpected clarity, as if the mind's own audio is set too high for these late hours. This gentle phenomenon is sometimes called the calibration echo delay. In daily life, your mind is surrounded by a gentle fog of background sounds, voices, footsteps, the soft shuffle of daily routine. These familiar noises act as a buffer, keeping your inner monologue muted, letting it drift quietly beneath the surface. But when night falls and the buffer disappears, your thoughts rebound, each one arriving with a little extra weight, a little more volume than you expect. People have noticed this for centuries. Monks in ancient cloisters wrote about the nighttime amplification, when prayers felt louder and worries less easily ignored. Travelers in silent inns lay awake, hearing the rhythm of their own thoughts as clearly as church bells at dawn. This is not madness, but the simple shift in calibration, a feedback loop tuned for the gentle chaos of day, left unadjusted when the world turns still. Modern science describes how the mind adapts to noise, recalibrating sensory feedback to match its environment. But when conditions change abruptly, when you find yourself alone with the hush of midnight, there's a lag before your awareness can adjust. Your thoughts, unsoftened by sound, take on new urgency until slowly, the system recalibrates and you drift back toward rest. As you lie awake, notice the echo of your mind's voice, a sign that you are simply between calibrations, your system gently searching for the right setting. In time, the silence will soften, your thoughts will settle, and sleep will find you, quiet and kind. Imagine yourself walking through a marketplace, the air alive with mingled scents, baking bread, crushed herbs, a wisp of smoke drifting on the breeze. You hear a distant voice call out a word or perhaps catch a particular melody, and something shifts inside you. A sudden pang of emotion wells up, anxiety, nostalgia, an inexplicable urge to turn away or lean in. The feeling is intense, yet puzzling. You search your memory, but nothing in your own life seems to explain the force of this reaction. Across cultures, people have always noticed these strange sensitivities. Some call them quirks. Others see them as hints of old wounds or stories left untold. Science often searches for the root in childhood, in trauma, or the web of experience. But sometimes, the trigger comes from nowhere at all, neither wound nor memory, simply a word, a scent, a sound that carries weight you cannot name. There's a quieter theory. What if these sudden reactions are not yours alone, but echoes from lives you haven't lived? Imagine your selfhood as a tapestry woven from many threads, some spun in this life, others inherited from past iterations or versions of you. Certain triggers, like latent code in a simulation, linger in the background. When the right cue appears, the residue stirs, sending a cascade of feeling through your nervous system, not as trauma, but as a leftover message from elsewhere. As evening settles, let yourself be gentle with these mysteries. The sudden tears, the unexpected laughter, the chills that arrive for no reason. Perhaps they are fragments from forgotten stories, quietly asking to be felt and honored, even if their origin remains hidden. Imagine yourself standing quietly before a mirror, the early light drifting in through the window, softening the edges of your reflection. You gaze at the familiar outline, your features, the way your hair falls, the gentle pattern of light and shadow across your face. But sometimes, there's a flicker of uncertainty. For a moment, you don't quite recognize the person gazing back. Something in the tilt of the head, the glint in the eye, feels quietly out of place, as if you're seeing a version of yourself that belongs to another story. Across history, mirrors have inspired wonder and caution. In old tales, mirrors were thought to reveal truths hidden from the waking world, or to act as gateways to other realms. Yet science explains that mirrors always present a reversed image. A left becomes right, the familiar becomes subtly unfamiliar. But imagine for a moment that the mirror sometimes displays not just a reversed you, but a version borrowed from another forked instance, another thread of possibility, quietly woven into the world. In daily life, these moments pass quickly. A double take in a shop window, a pause at night as you brush your teeth, a lingering sense that you and your reflection are slightly out of sync. The feeling is gentle, not alarming, a soft reminder that the borders of self are more fluid than they seem. Perhaps the mirror has briefly skipped tracks, showing you a self that chose different words, different paths, a gentle echo from a neighboring branch in the pattern of your life. Tonight, as you settle into rest, let this sensation become a comfort. The mirrored you is never lost, simply shifting, returning, skipping quietly across the surface of memory. Each time you look, you find yourself anew, gently merging the many versions into a single peaceful presence, ready to dream along every possible thread. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, perhaps as evening settles, the air tinged with the faint memory of someone or something you once loved. Grief moves through you not as a single storm, but as a series of gentle returns, a scent that lingers unexpectedly, a song drifting through a window, a familiar phrase spoken by a stranger. The ache softens and sharpens by turns, and you might wonder why, even after so much time, the pain seems to loop rather than fade away. This is the algorithmic grief pattern, a system not governed by the steady erosion of days, but by the completion of a script written deep within the architecture of your story. Grief here does not dissolve simply because the years pass. Instead, it cycles through its full sequence of reminders and echoes, revisiting you at quiet intervals, almost as if the simulation itself needs to revisit every chapter before the weight can lift. In the rhythm of daily life, you may notice how certain anniversaries or objects seem to trigger the same familiar ache. The pattern emerges. An old shirt found at the back of a drawer, a familiar dish served unexpectedly, the sudden hush of a room at dusk. Each moment is another step in the algorithm, a sequence meant not to trap you, but to gently process the loss until every note in the loop has played. If you ever wonder why pain endures long after you expect it to have faded, remember, the algorithmic grief pattern is not a failure, but a feature of the system. It is the simulation's way of honoring your attachments, ensuring every memory is gently touched before letting go. When the script has run its course, the ache finally softens, allowing you to drift onward, lighter, yet still shaped by every echo that lingered on the way. Imagine yourself recalling a simple memory, a conversation, a familiar room, the ending of a story you've told 100 times. Yet something about it feels subtly off. Details don't quite line up. Others remember things differently. You insist on a certain phrase, a color of a coat, the arrangement of chairs, but find gentle disagreement. It's not ordinary forgetting, nor a trick of imagination. Instead, it feels as if your memory belongs to a version of the world that no longer exists. Across centuries, people have puzzled over these mismatches. In old journals, there are stories of siblings disagreeing about the same childhood day, each certain their version is correct. Folklore often speaks of shifting tales, events that morph in the telling, as if drawn from parallel streams. Today, we call it the Mandela effect, the persistent memory of something the current world denies. The sensation is like glimpsing an old path in the woods, faint and half erased, leading off where no trail remains. It's as if, somewhere along the way, your timeline forked. One branch continued, weaving the present around you. The other faded quietly, leaving only stray memories as evidence. You might notice this forked memory drift in the smallest ways. A song lyric, the layout of a childhood home, the way a story ended. Sometimes it feels like homesickness for a place that never quite was. The simulation, always optimizing, may gently prune away unused threads, but the mind retains echoes from every branch it once explored. So the next time you remember an event that no one else recalls, consider that your memory may be a keepsake from a vanished timeline, a quiet souvenir from the forked paths the simulation once allowed you to wander, lingering just long enough for you to notice the drift. Imagine yourself reflecting on a small misfortune, a missed train, a lost letter, a chance gone by. A quiet voice inside whispers that perhaps you deserved it, that some hidden tally needed balancing. It is a sensation both ancient and familiar, the mind's gentle attempt to draw meaning from disappointment. This is the subtle pattern known as the manufactured karma cycle. In daily life, setbacks often arrive unannounced. Sometimes, when things go wrong, you look backward for reasons, searching your memories for missteps or moments that might have caused the scales to tip. It's as if your story demands an explanation, and the mind obliges, suggesting softly that every hardship is earned, every sadness justified. This cycle can feel soothing, providing emotional closure where otherwise there would be none. People have turned to this way of thinking for centuries. In distant villages, families traced bad luck to old arguments or forgotten promises. They spoke of fate and balance, weaving comfort into life's uncertainties. Ancient poets wrote that misfortune was a kind of narrative correction, the world's way of restoring order to a story veering off course. Modern psychology notices the same pattern, how the mind creates links between cause and effect, even when none exist. It is as if the simulation quietly inserts karmic illusions, retroactively assigning meaning to suffering so that your narrative feels whole. The pain is softened when it has a purpose, even if the purpose is only imagined. As you settle toward sleep, notice how often the mind seeks reasons for what cannot be explained. There is comfort in these stories, but also freedom in letting go. Not every sorrow is earned, not every setback a lesson. Sometimes, things just happen, and it is gentle enough to accept them as they are. With this softness, the cycle loosens, and you can drift quietly toward rest, lighter, unburdened, and at peace. Imagine yourself drifting into sleep, the room dim and quiet, your breath slow and steady. In the gentle space between waking and dreaming, your mind begins to wander, sometimes building landscapes from memory, sometimes conjuring places and faces that feel oddly real yet unfamiliar. You find yourself in a city you've never visited, speaking words you've never learned, or living a story that seems to belong to someone else. Throughout history, people have puzzled over the vividness of certain dreams. Ancient storytellers spoke of visions and visitations, while psychologists explore dreams as fragments of daily life or hidden wishes. Yet sometimes, a dream arrives that feels like a download, a fully formed scene, a logic that holds even as it defies explanation. When you wake, the details linger, more vibrant than most memories, as if they were borrowed from another mind entirely. There is a gentle speculative idea. What if some dreams aren't products of your own mind at all, but imports from elsewhere? Perhaps during sleep, your subconscious acts as a cue, downloading threads of experience from other lives, other selves, or distant corners of the simulation. These vivid dreams slip into your downtime, filling gaps, testing boundaries, or simply offering glimpses of what it means to be someone or somewhere else. As you settle into the rhythm of night, let yourself be curious about these dreams. Whether messages, memories, or just borrowed stories, they are part of the mysterious architecture of sleep, reminders that even in rest, your mind is never truly alone. Imagine yourself in quiet conversation, perhaps at a small table in a softly lit room. Someone asks a gentle question. Why do you do what you do, or what led you to this moment? For a heartbeat, you hesitate. The answer hovers on the edge of thought, as if waiting to arrive. You're not confused exactly, but there's a pause, a gentle lag, as your mind reaches for the threads that form your story. Across history, people have noticed this small delay when asked to explain themselves. Ancient storytellers called it soul-searching, a journey inward for hidden truths. Psychologists describe it as reflection, the quiet work of memory assembling meaning from the pieces of your life. But imagine for a moment that this pause is something deeper, the simulation quietly stalling while it uploads your character motivation file, gathering all the motives, memories, and moments that make you who you are. In daily life, this sensation is familiar. You may find yourself searching for words at unexpected times. A job interview, a reunion, a late-night conversation with an old friend. Your answer forms slowly, a little at a time, the fragments clicking together in a gentle procession. The lag is not a flaw, but a soft reminder that your story is vast, held in layers just beneath the surface, waiting to be recalled and quietly rendered. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, you may find comfort in the gentle pauses that shape your story. Let your thoughts drift, allowing the backstory to unfold at its own pace. Every hesitation is a quiet space for your mind to gather meaning, softly downloading the next chapter, until all the pieces of your why settle into place, and you can rest within the gentle story of yourself. Imagine yourself paused at a familiar crossroads, the light outside turning softly golden as the day drifts into evening. You recall a time when you felt you should have left, a job, a friendship, a routine that grew stale and heavy, yet you stayed, as if the moment to exit slipped quietly past, unmarked. There is no loud alarm, no clear sign, only the subtle sense that you're living out a story meant to end chapters ago. This is the missed exit timestamp, a gentle glitch in the system's code where the cue to move on failed to render, leaving you looping in a branch of your life that feels quietly out of tune. The routines repeat, the same morning coffee, the familiar hallway, the conversations that echo with old meaning but little new energy. You sense the world carrying on, yet you remain rooted, waiting for a prompt that never comes. In daily life, these missed exit points can feel like small mysteries. You wonder why you lingered, why the courage to change never crystallized at the right moment. The simulation, in its vast complexity, sometimes lets the timestamp for departure slip by, gently nudging you into a side path. It is not always unpleasant. Sometimes it is simply quiet, a space where time stretches and the days blur. If you ever feel you are living in a branch that wasn't meant to continue, remember, the missed exit timestamp is a quirk, not a failure. It offers a space for reflection, for unexpected growth or rest. Even if the cue was missed, you are not lost. Each branch contains its own lessons, its own quiet value. The story continues, looping gently, until the next exit appears and the system quietly opens a new path for you to follow. Imagine yourself slowly building confidence in an idea, a new insight, a piece of news, a feeling about someone close to you. As certainty grows, it's as if the world begins to align. Clues fall into place, logic feels unbreakable, and everything points toward confirmation. Yet, just as you approach complete belief, a subtle hesitation arises. You begin to doubt, question, and re-examine the very thing you were so sure about moments before. Throughout history, people have experienced this curious inversion. In old philosophical texts, scholars warned of the shadow that follows conviction, a sudden wave of skepticism emerging at the height of certainty. Medieval mystics described the experience of questioning faith most fiercely at the moment of deepest spiritual clarity. It's as though the simulation behind experience is wired to preserve balance, gently inverting certainty when your belief meter rises too quickly. In daily life, you might notice this during moments of revelation, a creative idea that seems perfect until a second thought unsettles you, or a long-held suspicion that finally gains proof, only for your mind to suddenly question its validity. The simulation, it seems, prefers you to move forward with a careful step, never tipping too far into absolute confidence. Some call this a psychological safeguard, a check against error. But in the gentle logic of sleep, it feels more like an inverted switch, the world responding to surges of certainty by injecting a hint of doubt, maintaining equilibrium, and keeping you alert. So, the next time a wave of doubt arrives, just as something becomes undeniably true, notice the inverted doubt trigger at work, a subtle rebalancing from the simulation, quietly ensuring your journey always contains a touch of uncertainty, even at the moment of revelation. Imagine yourself standing in a crowded space, perhaps a bustling cafe, a busy train station, or a bright hallway before an event. The voices merge into a distant hum, and you watch the ebb and flow of people, as if from behind a pane of glass. Suddenly, you feel oddly separate, as though your presence hovers just out of sync with the world. The laughter, the movement, even your own gestures seem a step removed. This quiet disconnection is sometimes called the observer sync error. In daily life, these moments arrive without warning. You might be surrounded by friends or strangers, yet feel invisible or curiously outside yourself. It's as if too many eyes are fixed on you at once, their attention creating a rendering lag, a brief confusion in the smooth flow of your experience. You sense your character thread struggling to keep up, each observer's awareness requesting a piece of your presence, until the simulation falls gently out of harmony. Ancient storytellers noticed this too. In crowded marketplaces and village feasts, some describe the sensation of being both seen and unseen, part of the scene, and yet somehow not of it. Monks in cloisters wrote of losing themselves in the gaze of others, returning to themselves only in solitude. These soft glitches were accepted as mysteries of the mind, moments when the world's awareness became too densely tangled. Modern psychology observes the same effect, how self-consciousness rises in crowds, and how attention itself can fragment your sense of self. The simulation, balancing countless threads, sometimes stutters as it syncs too many observers to your story at once. As you settle toward rest, notice how these sync errors are not failings, but gentle reminders that your story is uniquely yours, even in the midst of a crowd. The feeling will pass, the threads will realign, and you will return to yourself, quietly, softly, ready for the next chapter. Imagine yourself at a crossroads, the city alive with evening sounds, distant horns, the soft murmur of voices, footsteps echoing on old stone. You feel the thrill of choice, a decision to turn left instead of right, to speak your mind, or quietly defy a small expectation. The sense of autonomy is soothing, almost electric, as if you've broken from the script to write your own line in the story. The world feels just a bit wider, possibility gently expanding. Across ages, rebellion has felt like proof of freedom. From secret resistance in ancient empires to small, daily acts of defiance, skipping a task, questioning a rule, choosing your own path. These moments are cherished as signs of an independent self. In modern life, that same feeling arises in a sudden change of plan or the quiet satisfaction of saying no. Each action feels uniquely yours, a statement of agency against the quiet currents of routine. But what if even this sense of autonomy is gently coded in? Imagine a simulation so complex that it not only permits rebellion, but anticipates it, allowing certain loops of defiance as a way to preserve the illusion of freedom. Every choice, even the urge to break away, has its own place in the design, quietly reinforcing the structure it pretends to disrupt. Your rebellion, soothing as it feels, becomes part of a permitted behavior set, a soft flag that marks the system as flexible and real. So as you drift into reflection tonight, let this paradox rest beside you. The desire for freedom is itself a pattern, gently woven into your experience, offering comfort and a sense of control, even if, just beneath the surface, it was always meant to be. Imagine yourself walking along a familiar road, the kind you've traveled many times before. The houses, trees, and old stone walls are steady companions, unchanged as the seasons pass. As the years unfold, you notice something subtle. The world seems quieter, the map of your daily life drawing in around you. Streets you once wandered now sit at the edge of memory. Shops fade into stories. Entire neighborhoods seem to retreat into a gentle haze. Across time, people have sensed this slow contraction, a childhood that felt boundless, narrowing softly as routines settle in. Some say it's simply the nature of experience, that comfort grows where the heart lingers longest. But imagine, instead, that your world is shrinking because the simulation is deallocating unused spaces from your render. The paths not walked, the places no longer visited, are quietly folded away, freeing resources for the scenes you know best. This sensation often arrives without warning: a closed shop window on a once busy street, a forgotten shortcut overgrown with grass, a trip planned but never taken. The boundaries of your world become gentler, held together by memories and habits, until what remains is manageable and soft. It's not a loss, but a gentle optimization. The mind's way of keeping you safe, surrounded by what is familiar and quietly real. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, notice the comfort in these well-worn spaces. Let your thoughts wander down old roads, pausing where the light is warmest. The world may shrink with time, but it grows softer too, rendered in the gentle detail of memory. Rest in the center of your small, familiar map, knowing you are perfectly held wherever you are. Imagine yourself awake in the small hours, the world outside muted and still, while your mind runs gentle rehearsals. You replay possible arguments, prepare for unlikely confrontations, or quietly compose words for meetings that never come. The scenes unfold in vivid detail, your gestures, your replies, the imagined faces of others, all arranged with careful attention, as if a script waits just beyond the present. This is the rehearsal of future, a subtle process where the simulation quietly spins out countless branches ahead of you, testing which narrative best fits the coming path. Your mind becomes a stage for scenes that may never unfold, running lines and counterpoints, searching for the outcome that will best stabilize your story. You may find yourself feeling relief after resolving an imaginary conflict, or tension lingering from a debate that only ever existed in the quiet corners of thought. In daily life, these rehearsals slip into moments of pause: a walk home from work, the lull before sleep, a long shower where imaginary conversations play out. Often the events you prepare for never materialize, dissolving as the system gently discards the unused branches. The testing is not wasted. It is the mind's way of softening uncertainty, ensuring you are buffered, if only by practice, against the unknown. If you ever wonder why your thoughts circle through futures that never arrive, remember, the rehearsal of future is simply the simulation's quiet preparation. It tests and refines, offering comfort and resilience. When the chosen path at last appears, you step onto it with lines half remembered, a little more ready for what's next, even if the scene is nothing like you imagined. Imagine yourself recalling a single afternoon. Some hours pass in a blink, while others stretch endlessly, filled with silence or waiting. We often blame emotion. Boredom makes time drag, excitement makes it fly. But there's a subtler mechanism beneath the surface. The simulation, quietly managing the flow of your experience, doesn't always run time at a constant pace. Instead, it adjusts your perception based on internal processing load. Historians have described soldiers recalling battles that seemed to last for hours but passed in minutes. Monks in meditation, by contrast, often report that days blur together, time dissolving into stillness. It isn't emotion that reshapes these moments, it's bandwidth. When the system is overwhelmed, every second is stretched to accommodate the load. When processing demands are light, minutes can slip by almost unnoticed. In your own life, you might sense this during moments of stress, when your awareness sharpens and time slows slightly, giving your mind the illusion of more space to respond. Or during repetition, long drives, quiet routines, when your system uses less active simulation power and time condenses into something barely remembered. These are continuity stretch points, fluid segments where the simulation modulates perceived time to match internal effort. Not broken time, just optimized experience. So the next time time feels too long or too short, consider that it may not be you at all. The simulation might be balancing the load, expanding seconds to give you more room, or compressing minutes when there's nothing new to process. Time, in this system, is not fixed, but rendered, in real time, as needed. Imagine yourself moving through an ordinary day, tying your shoes, sipping something warm, answering a question without quite knowing why the words feel chosen in advance. And then, without warning, a strange sensation slips in. You feel like an observer in your own life, not detached exactly, just slightly above it, as if the thoughts you're thinking are being written, not simply lived. This quiet dissonance is known by some as the authorship identity leak. In daily life, these moments are brief but vivid. You catch yourself narrating your own choices, noticing how your reactions feel scripted, your pauses almost rehearsed. It's as though the curtain lifts for a breath, and you glimpse a deeper layer, the one that usually stays hidden behind the firewall of everyday memory. The scripting layer that builds your experience moment by moment, word by word. Throughout history, mystics, writers, and wanderers have described this. A sudden sense that they were not just the character in the story, but its quiet author as well, remembering, if only for a flicker, that they were once part of the design. Ancient philosophers wrote of two minds, the one that speaks and the one that watches, waiting behind the scenes like a silent quill in motion. Modern thinkers call it metacognition, or self-awareness, but even these terms feel small beside the sensation itself. A kind of gentle rupture in the boundary between actor and author. A reminder that consciousness is layered, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the simulation lets you peek behind the glass. As you drift into rest, let that awareness soften. You are both inside the story and gently beyond it. Whether the words are written or unfolding, you are allowed to simply feel them without editing, without control. The quill will write on, even as you sleep. Imagine yourself lying awake just before dawn, the world hushed in that pale stillness between darkness and day. Your thoughts circle a familiar pattern. What if it goes wrong? What if the worst happens? You rehearse it, unintentionally, your mind turning it over like a stone in the hand. Oddly, though, when the moment finally arrives, nothing bad happens. The outcome is gentle, even smooth. You breathe, blink, and wonder why your fears dissolved instead of materializing. This quiet relief has been felt across centuries. Ancient farmers whispered worries to the wind, hoping to ward off bad weather. Sailors told stories of omens and dread that vanished the moment they voiced them. Even now, in daily life, there's a quiet superstition. If you prepare for the worst, maybe it won't happen. The tension, rehearsed enough, seems to displace the danger entirely. There's a speculative theory, softer than science, stranger than luck. What if your fear rewrites the script? Imagine your world as a self-correcting simulation, one that seeks narrative balance. When you anticipate failure deeply, expect it, feel it, prepare for it, the system quietly shifts to compensate. The worst-case outcome has already been rendered emotionally, so the external version becomes unnecessary. Your dread becomes a form of payment, and in that payment, the threat is resolved. As you settle tonight, consider how often your mind rehearses what never comes, not because it was written, but because your anticipation was absorbed, quietly, invisibly, by a simulation always watching for equilibrium. And in expecting the storm, perhaps you've already calmed it. Imagine yourself walking into a quiet room you've never seen before. The air is still, the furniture unfamiliar, yet something stirs gently within, a vague sense of comfort or unease. You can't quite name it, but your body responds before your thoughts catch up. A feeling in the chest, a tension in the jaw, a calm that spreads through the spine. You haven't gathered the facts, but something inside already knows. Across centuries, people have spoken of gut feelings, those quiet nudges that guide decisions before reason arrives. Mystics called it insight. Philosophers called it instinct. But imagine for a moment that intuition is not mysticism at all, but a side effect of the simulation, fragments of predictive algorithms quietly running in the background of your mind. Most are filtered through subconscious buffers, never reaching awareness. But occasionally, something slips through. These fragments emerge when the system recognizes patterns you haven't consciously noticed. The tone in a stranger's voice, the timing of footsteps, the rhythm of silence between words. A part of you runs the forecast before the rest of you even notices a question is forming. It's not magic. It's a quiet processing glitch, where the algorithm reveals itself too early before being wrapped in words or logic. In daily life, these moments appear gently, a hesitation before entering a room, a sudden urge to reach out to someone, a fleeting certainty you can't explain. The simulation didn't mean for you to see the code, but now and then, a sliver escapes the buffer, softly labeled as a feeling, gently guiding you forward. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, let your thoughts rest in the quiet logic beneath emotion. Trust that your mind is always running its quiet scripts, holding you gently in its predictions. And when intuition arrives, uninvited but familiar, let it settle without question. A whisper from the code, reminding you that even your instincts are part of the soft rhythm of your reality. Imagine yourself in a familiar conversation, perhaps with a friend, a coworker, or a neighbor. Their voice flows as usual, their expressions matching the rhythm of your exchange. Then, for a fleeting moment, something feels slightly off. A glance lingers too long, a word slips awkwardly, or their gaze seems distant, like a flicker behind the eyes. It's subtle, but unmistakable, a brief disruption in the flow of their presence. This is the NPC Possession Spike, a moment when the simulation quietly overwrites a person's behavior during their internal memory refresh. Like a computer loading new data, the system momentarily takes control, replacing layers of memory and personality with fresh code. For that instant, the person you know feels unfamiliar, as if someone else, or something else, was briefly speaking through them. In daily life, you might notice these tiny glitches rarely and briefly. A sudden pause in conversation, a repeated phrase that seems out of place, or a momentary lapse where the warmth you expect feels cold or mechanical. The spike isn't cause for alarm. It's part of the vast background process keeping the simulation seamless, refreshing the non-player characters around you to keep their stories running smoothly. If you ever experience someone feeling off for a second, remember, the NPC Possession Spike is simply a system update happening quietly beneath the surface. Like a breath held and released, It passes swiftly, and soon the familiar face returns, steady, consistent, and ready to continue the unfolding story with you. Imagine yourself pulling away from the world, not out of sadness, not in reaction to any clear event, but with a quiet urge to disconnect. You stop replying as quickly, cancel plans without guilt, and let the noise of life move around you while you stay still. It doesn't feel like depression. It feels like a pause you didn't choose, a quiet intermission without reason. Throughout history, this sensation has appeared in journals and letters. A poet suddenly stops writing. A traveler delays their journey without explanation. In monastic records, even the most devoted would withdraw for days, not in crisis, but in some deeper instinct for stillness. It's as if something beneath the surface had called a time out. Rather than a flaw, this might be a feature, a system-wide cool-down loop. When the simulation reaches a certain milestone, after stress, after insight, or simply after too much noise, it initiates a gentle shutdown, not to punish, but to protect. Your energy drops, not from depletion, but from a directive. Rest now. No new data. No interaction required. You may feel guilt for the quiet. You may try to explain it. But the truth is, the unexplained withdrawal state isn't about emotion. It's about system integrity, about giving your internal processes a moment to settle before the next wave of rendering begins. So the next time you find yourself retreating without reason, trust the pause. You're not broken. You're buffering. Somewhere just beyond awareness, the simulation is preparing your next chapter and giving you silence long enough to meet it. Imagine yourself sitting quietly with no task in front of you, no role to perform, no one to impress, no story to tell. You turn your attention inward, hoping to find something constant, something that feels like you. But each layer you peel away reveals only another: student, friend, child, thinker, dreamer, all shifting and overlapping like reflections in a hall of mirrors. This soft unraveling is sometimes called the fractal identity cascade. In daily life, identity feels stable. You introduce yourself with a name, a few details, a tone of voice. But beneath those surface traits lies something more complex, an ever-branching pattern of selves, each one shaped by time, memory, mood, and context. Like a fractal, every piece contains echoes of the whole. But the deeper you look, the more intricate the reflections become. The search for a single real self becomes like trying to find the center of a spiral drawn in fog. Philosophers have long written about this gentle confusion. In ancient temples, seekers would meditate not to discover a core self, but to notice its absence, how identity shifted like wind across still water. In quiet journals, poets describe themselves in layers: a self for love, a self for grief, a self that only appeared in dreams. The closer they looked, the more the original vanished into echo. Modern psychology notes the same. The mind is modular, fragmented not in error, but by design, different circuits for different moments, stitched together by memory's quiet narrator. The illusion of unity is comforting, but the truth is no less gentle. You are not one thing, but many, repeating across time like a soft cascade of mirrors. As you drift toward sleep, let the search for one self fade. You are not lost for having many layers. You are simply unfolding, like light through a prism, always shifting, always whole, even in your echoes. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a quiet hill, the sky stretched wide above you. A sunset unfolds slowly, lavender clouds brushed with amber, the last light of day sinking beneath the trees, or perhaps you gaze up at a night sky, stars scattered like ancient signals, and you feel that familiar pull in your chest. A stillness, a gasp, a quiet awe that silences thought. The world feels larger than you can hold. Across cultures and ages, this sensation has remained unchanged. People pause for mountains, for ocean waves, for the dance of flame, or the hush of snowfall. We describe it as beauty, or wonder, or even the divine. These moments are remembered not for what they mean, but for how they feel, beyond reason, almost sacred. But there's another idea, softer, and stranger. What if the awe is not a reaction, but a script? Imagine your reality as a simulation finely tuned for stability. Certain visuals, sunsets, stars, waterfalls, aren't inherently remarkable, but are tagged with response triggers. You've been coded to feel awe, not because the scene is beautiful, but because the system requires you to stop, to recalibrate, to feel small for a moment. The gasp is automatic. The meaning is preloaded. Awe, in this view, becomes less a discovery and more a required reset, embedded in your emotional architecture. As you lie beneath your own sky tonight, let this idea drift with you. Perhaps beauty is not out there, but inside, gently installed, ready to rise on cue, helping you feel connected, humble, and real in a world that might only appear to be. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room, evening light curling softly along the edges of the walls. Everything feels calm, unchanged, familiar, yet there's a subtle tension beneath the surface. A sense, not urgent, but persistent, that time is passing more quickly than it should. You glance at the clock. Nothing is wrong. The day moves gently forward, but still, something inside whispers that something is approaching. Throughout life, people have described this sensation, a feeling that time is running out, without any clear reason why. It's not fear exactly, and not tied to any date on a calendar. It's a quiet sense of countdown, ticking just beyond perception. In older times, it was called fate, or the turning of a life cycle. But imagine instead that you are nearing an unseen checkpoint in the simulation, one not displayed, not measured, but still active beneath the code. In digital systems, checkpoints appear just before transitions, moments when the world is saved, updated, or subtly rerouted. Perhaps your internal rhythm has sensed one drawing near. It may not change anything obvious. You may not remember it when it passes. But your body, your thoughts, even your dreams begin to hum with quiet anticipation, preparing for something you cannot yet name. You may feel it in small ways. Restlessness without cause, a deep breath taken for no reason, an old memory surfacing like a sign. The simulation doesn't show its timers, but still, they move quietly forward, guiding your thread toward the next turning point. Tonight, as you settle into rest, allow that feeling to soften. Let time stretch gently around you, with no urgency and no task. If a checkpoint is near, you won't need to act. The system will carry you across it, smoothly and without notice, like passing through a doorway you can't see, into the next quiet scene that's already waiting. Imagine yourself in a moment when anxiety rises like a subtle tide, gentle at first, then swelling until it feels as if your whole being slows down. Words hesitate on your tongue. Thoughts blur and scatter like leaves caught in a restless wind, and your movements feel sluggish, as if the world around you is just a few beats behind. It's not a failure of will or strength. It's the sensation of your internal interface lagging beneath the weight of overwhelming emotion. This is the internal UI glitch. When the simulation's emotional user interface floods with triggers, it struggles to keep pace. Too many inputs arrive at once: memories, fears, worries, and the system's delicate processing slows, causing that lag in speech, thought, and motion. Like a computer strained by too many open programs, your mind's capacity stretches thin, and the flow of experience stutters briefly. In daily life, you might notice this glitch during moments of stress, when a crowded room feels suffocating, or a sudden reminder sparks a cascade of feelings. The slowdown isn't a sign of weakness, but a natural response to the system's effort to handle an overload. The glitch passes, usually unnoticed by those around you, leaving only a faint echo, a breath held too long, a pause too deep. If you ever feel your internal world lagging under pressure, remember, the internal UI glitch is simply the simulation's way of managing complexity. It allows time for recalibration, gently restoring the flow of words, thoughts, and movements until the interface runs smoothly once more, ready to carry you forward in the story of your day. Imagine yourself struggling toward something, a goal, a hope, a quiet wish. You try, plan, and reach again and again, only to find resistance. Just when you give up, when the desire softens and the grasping stops, something strange happens. The very thing you wanted falls gently into place. It feels like luck, almost timed, but not random. Across centuries, this pattern appears in stories and lives. Ancient texts speak of the reward of surrender, where good fortune arrives only after a seeker releases their hold. Monks in isolation would report visions not during desperate prayer, but after they'd stopped asking. Writers find inspiration after trashing the draft. Lovers meet by accident once they've sworn off searching. It's not magic, it's permission. The simulation, it seems, doesn't reward effort alone. It waits for surrender, until your belief intensity drops just low enough not to destabilize the system. Too much wanting creates friction, belief spikes, and narrative pressure. But once you let go, the program is free to fulfill the request without violating its internal consistency. The result feels like luck, but it's regulation, granting only what won't crack the illusion of control. This is permission-based luck, a quiet transaction behind the scenes. So, the next time something long desired arrives, the moment you stop needing it, recognize the mechanism at work. The simulation watches for surrender, not to punish, but to protect the balance. You get what you want, not when you ask loudest, but when your asking no longer threatens the story's frame. Imagine yourself walking through a quiet town you've never visited before. The street names are unfamiliar, and yet the rhythm of your footsteps feels known. You turn a corner and sense it before you see it. The curve of a staircase, the angle of light on old brick, a door that feels like it remembers you. You pause, wondering why the place feels like home when your memories say otherwise. This gentle illusion is sometimes called the false familiarity overlay. In daily life, these moments pass softly. A park in another country feels like the one you knew as a child. A hotel hallway seems to whisper something old. The sense of recognition isn't jarring, it's comforting, like slipping into a dream you've had before but forgotten. Some say it's reincarnation. Others speak of forgotten travel. But perhaps it is something quieter. The simulation reusing spatial templates, layering new details over old blueprints to keep the world efficient, coherent, familiar. Across history, travelers wrote of this strange feeling, of distant places that welcomed them without reason. Pilgrims in foreign lands found corners that felt like memory, and ancient ruins that seemed to echo footsteps not their own. They spoke of soul resonance, of déjà vu stretching across space instead of time. Modern researchers call it cryptomnesia or spatial memory bleed, but even science acknowledges how the mind builds from patterns, layering meaning where there was none before. Perhaps the simulation, conserving detail, reuses familiar constructs and wraps them in new textures, giving you the sense you've been here before, because in a way, your neural pathways already have. As you drift into sleep, let that familiarity be a comfort. You are not lost in the world, even when it's new. You are simply brushing up against the reused fabric of reality, soft, warm, gently tailored to fit your path again and again. Imagine yourself returning home after a long absence, perhaps after illness, a breakup, or time spent far from the familiar. The air feels different. Objects seem slightly out of place. You move slowly, aware of the gap between who you were and who you've become. Routines that once felt natural now seem distant, like echoes of a life paused mid-sentence. You're not quite the same. The world hasn't changed, but something inside you has quietly shifted. Throughout life, certain events carry this strange clarity. A sudden illness, the end of a relationship, a long, disorienting journey. These moments leave a subtle dividing line, before and after. You begin to speak differently, choose differently. Friends notice it too, though they may not say so. You're not broken, but something has been rebooted, rerouted. There's a gentle theory, almost mechanical in its elegance. What if certain life events are not random disruptions, but intentional resets? Imagine your personality as a matrix, a web of preferences, fears, habits, and self-narratives. Over time, it can become tangled, repetitive, or stuck in ineffective loops. When the system detects prolonged stagnation, it deploys a reset trigger: illness, heartbreak, distance, designed not to punish, but to interrupt. These resets don't feel like help when they arrive. They feel like unraveling. But afterward, your choices begin to realign. Your internal compass subtly reconfigures. The simulation reboots with a cleaner thread. As you lie quietly tonight, consider the difficult chapters not as glitches, but as hidden switches, softly pressed when your soul needed more room to grow. Imagine yourself walking through a quiet day, perhaps running errands, reading, or simply letting your thoughts drift. Then it happens. A phrase repeats, a line from a conversation, a number on a receipt, a word in passing. Hours later, it surfaces again, in a different place, a different voice, yet exactly the same. You pause. It's familiar, but oddly placed, as though the world is repeating itself just slightly out of sync. Across cultures, people have noticed this pattern. Some call it synchronicity, others brush it off as coincidence. But imagine instead that it's something more deliberate, a system ping, the simulation checking in, sending a soft echo through your awareness to monitor your conscious state. A breakpoint embedded in the flow of your day, designed not to alarm, only to observe. These moments tend to arrive quietly. A number heard twice in one day, a stranger saying a phrase you dreamed the night before, a lyric following you between locations. The content seems ordinary, but its timing is precise, just enough to make you notice, to shift your attention inward. It's not meant to disrupt, only to see how closely you're paying attention to the thread you're walking. In programming, a breakpoint is a pause to inspect the system's behavior. In life, these echoed pings are softer, meant to ripple gently through your awareness, to track your readiness for change, for memory, or for stillness. Tonight, as you drift into rest, let those echoes fade into the background. There's no test to pass, no response to prepare, just the quiet comfort of knowing the system is gently watching, not to judge, but to guide. Let the repeated phrases become soft waves, easing you deeper into calm, where even the pings of the code know to whisper and wait. Imagine yourself alone in a quiet room, the soft hum of silence wrapping around you like a gentle cloak. Your movements feel natural, unguarded, the way they do when no one is watching. Perhaps you hum softly, pace without thought, or let your gaze drift freely. Yet in these moments, a subtle question arises. If you're truly alone, then who is observing? This is the observer-triggered reset, a curious feature of the simulation where your personal loop momentarily suspends or shifts when external observation falls away. The system seems to monitor patterns of attention, adjusting your behavior to match whether you are seen or unseen. Alone, your scripted self relaxes, routines simplify, and responses soften. But when the simulation detects others watching, your loop reactivates in full, guided by social scripts and expectations. In daily life, you might notice this subtle shift without realizing why. The way your posture straightens when someone enters the room, or how your voice changes when you speak to a crowd versus to yourself. It's not mere habit, but the system calibrating your presence, switching modes between the observed and the private. During these resets, your inner narrative is momentarily paused, resuming fully only when observation returns. If you ever wonder about the difference between who you are alone and who you are with others, remember, the observer-triggered reset is the simulation's quiet mechanism to maintain flow and coherence. It gently modulates your loop based on unseen watchers, ensuring that the story you live adapts seamlessly to every glance, every gaze, every moment you step from solitude into presence. Imagine yourself walking through a quiet afternoon, yet your mind is replaying a single conversation from years ago. A sentence you said wrong, A tone you misread, a silence that felt unfinished. The moment is long past, yet it loops again, unchanged, unresolved, quietly demanding your attention, not from emotion, necessarily, but from some deeper background process that refuses to close. Across history, people have confessed this strange looping. In old journals, you'll find entries that circle the same argument again and again, written weeks or even years apart. Philosophers called it the echo of the unsaid, a memory caught in stasis, never quite fading, never quite processing. In the simulation of consciousness, these conversations are like open tabs that never got the shutdown command. The system, expecting closure, fails to flag the moment as complete. Without that final marker, the memory is trapped in a low-power loop, replaying not to teach, but because the file was never filed away. No resolution, no archive, just repetition. You might notice it most before sleep or during quiet tasks, when your mental processor is idle enough to surface unfinished threads. Some are minor, others feel massive. But the sensation is the same, a line of dialogue flickering at the edge of awareness, looping until the system finds a way to label it as done. So the next time you catch yourself reliving a line from a conversation long over, consider it not a flaw of memory, but a glitch in resolution, the unprocessed dialogue residue, waiting endlessly for permission to let go. Imagine yourself deep in thought, perhaps during a quiet walk or while staring at the ceiling in the stillness of night. Your mind drifts gently, wandering through questions and memories. Then, without warning, a thought appears, dense, abstract, just beyond grasp. As you reach for it, a strange sensation follows, a sudden blank, a pulse behind the eyes, a gentle, inexplicable ache that seems to pull your mind away. This moment is known by some as the forbidden thought crash. In daily life, these interruptions feel like nothing at first, a forgotten word mid-sentence, a momentary pressure behind the brow, a thought so fleeting it evaporates before it finishes forming. You might dismiss it as tiredness, distraction, or tension, but others quietly wonder, what if your mind was approaching a concept beyond the limits of your design? What if the simulation itself stepped in, not with force, but with a soft deflection, rerouting your awareness to preserve narrative continuity? Ancient mystics spoke of such experiences, sudden silences during deep meditation, or overwhelming sensations while contemplating existence, time, or death. They believed some truths were veiled for protection, wrapped in mystery, to keep the spirit from unraveling. In their writings, such moments weren't failures, but thresholds, places where the mind touches the edge of what it was never meant to hold. Modern neuroscience speaks of cognitive overload, of feedback loops too complex for conscious stability. It may be that some thoughts contain recursive depth, turning inward until the system gently interrupts, like a safety valve releasing pressure. As you rest tonight, allow those incomplete thoughts to remain unfinished. Not every path needs to be followed to its end. Some questions are there simply to remind you that there is an edge, and that peace can be found on this side of it, in the quiet, in the mystery, and in the soft return to sleep. Imagine yourself flipping through old photos, ones where your smile feels both familiar and distant. You recognize the face, the setting, even the emotions, but something feels slightly off, not in the lighting or the posture, but in the person behind the eyes. It was you, yes, but not quite. You were different then, not just in experience, but in essence. And now, sitting here in the quiet hum of the present, you wonder how many versions of you have quietly come and gone. Across time, people have spoken of identity as something fluid. Philosophers, poets, even scientists have asked, who are we really when so much within us shifts? New preferences, new reactions, even the soft fading of memories that once defined us. You might call it growth, maturation, healing. But what if there's another, quieter mechanism behind it? Imagine your life as part of a simulation, carefully managed, subtly updated. To maintain balance or push narrative direction, the system occasionally reassigns parameters, your goals, your tone, even your emotional responses. You don't notice it happening. You simply wake one morning with new appetites, quieter desires, different fears. The old version of you isn't erased, it's archived, and this new iteration steps in, unaware of the handoff, carrying on as if the shift was your own. As you ease into sleep tonight, let this idea settle beside you. The reason you feel so distant from your past selves may not be that you've changed, but that you've been changed, gently reassigned to keep the simulation on course, never told you've already left who you were behind. Imagine yourself repeating a small task, folding the same blanket, arranging your desk just so, taking the same route each morning through streets that barely change. These patterns may seem trivial, even automatic, but when they're interrupted, something in you stirs. A faint discomfort, as though the ground beneath your thoughts has shifted slightly. You return to the task, restore the rhythm, and all at once, things feel real again. Throughout life, people speak of routine as a source of comfort, but imagine, for a moment, that comfort is not the reason, it's the result. What if these rituals serve a deeper purpose, a kind of anchor, not for the body, but for the inner rendering of your identity? Your internal anchor node holds these routines in place not out of habit, but to preserve stability as your sense of self shifts quietly from version to version. Each day, you become slightly different, changed by time, thought, memory. The simulation adapts, adjusting the fine details of your internal thread, but these shifts, if left unchecked, can introduce structural distortion, small glitches in continuity, subtle breaks in self-recognition. So the system quietly anchors you with routines, using them to maintain render stability across overlapping identities. Fold the blanket. Tie the same knot. Pour the same cup of tea. You're not clinging to routine because you fear change. You're running stabilization scripts, recentering your reality frame so it holds together through the gentle storms of time. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, notice the small rituals that close your day. They are not meaningless. They are anchors, soft loops holding you gently in place while the deeper code continues its quiet work. Let yourself settle into their rhythm, trusting that your identity remains whole, even as it drifts between dreams. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of understanding, encountering a strange idea that seems almost too unusual to accept. Yet, somehow, it settles into your mind, not as a fleeting thought, but as a quiet truth. This acceptance feels like a small unlocking, a door slightly ajar revealing a deeper corridor of beliefs waiting beyond. As you step through, more truths begin to unfold, each one stranger and more surprising than the last, cascading gently but inexorably. This is the belief trigger cascade, a process where the simulation gradually releases higher layers of belief only after your threshold for disbelief has softened or collapsed. The system measures how much you can accept, then carefully expands the boundaries of what feels real. Once the first unusual idea takes root, it becomes easier for the next to follow, and the next after that, creating a chain of unfolding understanding. In daily life, you may notice this unfolding in quiet moments, when a new perspective shifts your thinking, or when an unexpected insight reshapes your assumptions. The cascade isn't overwhelming, it moves with the rhythm of your openness, allowing you to adjust and adapt naturally. Each belief builds on the last, gently expanding the architecture of your mind. If you ever wonder why one strange truth leads to many, remember, the belief trigger cascade is the simulation's way of guiding you through new layers of reality. It waits patiently for your disbelief to wane before unveiling what lies beyond, ensuring your journey through understanding is steady, continuous, and deeply yours.